Good evening, everybody.
Recording in progress.
I'm calling the Mansfield Town Council to order. This is our March 28th, 2022 meeting. This is our second meeting in person, and it is a delight to have everybody here. Sarah Ann, would you call the roll? I know that there are two people who have stepped out, or one person who stepped out temporarily, but he'll be back. And there he is. Okay, please call the roll.
Osberger.
Here.
Berthelot. Bruder.
Here.
Coleman.
Here.
Bertoni. Kutchenberger. Moran.
Here.
Shuren.
Here.
Shaken.
Here.
Ms. Berthelot just stepped out. She will be back. All right. Next thing on our agenda is an opportunity for the public to address the council. Are there any members of the public here to address us? Please come forward. You have a 5-minute time limit. Please state your name and address. You may ask questions of the council. We will respond to them at a later date. So please begin.
Thank you. My name is James Kelly. I'm a resident out on Coventry Road here in town. Just wanted to come in and talk on behalf of us as residents on Coventry Road. Mr. Galley is our neighbor. Just about the conditions of the road. I have a lot of respect for the fact that it's a dirt road and it's nice and quiet and we love it out there that way. But it's been kind of an issue for the 8 years that we've been here, especially in the winter. Kids getting off the bus from time to time when there's the freeze and the thaw. Like up to the ankles in mud, and that sort of thing. And there's a stretch there where I really believe that there's some drainage issues as well. Just really feel like there could be more done. The town garage does a good job when we call to have come out and put dirt down and gravel and whatnot. But it ends up being kind of a short-term fix. I understand it's a high trafficked area with buses coming and going and that type of thing, which hurt it too. But love to see something done. I know a lot of our neighbors. Again, we love the quiet of it. If it were paved, I do realize there's a concern about what kind of traffic would shoot through there. I don't know if that's ever been considered, or if speed bumps or something. Like on Depot Road could be something considered that might help with that. But, in paying the taxes that we do and we enjoy living out there, I mean, it'd be great to see something upgraded with it. So just wanted to speak on behalf of some of our neighbors that couldn't make it tonight. And I know Mr. Galley here to talk as well. So just wanted to add my 2 cents to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else wishes to address the council? Come forward. Mr. Gailey, could you get closer to the microphone? Yes, it's necessary for the system for people who are watching us remote. Oh,
Try that?
yes.
That sounds better, right? James Keeley at 85 Coventry Road. Want to put a face to the name. I sent a letter to the council, or an email to the
Yes.
council last week, or a couple weeks ago, just stating my concern about the conditions of the road, and James just emphasized everything I'd already mentioned. Trying to be diplomatic about it, whatever we can think of for traffic easing measures in place, whether it's, a solar-powered sign to make sure residents, shows their speed to help slow them down, or speed bumps, not opposed to the idea, but just a concern of safety and access for the residents all time of year. The spring thaw is especially the worst time, but the potholes throughout the year. And I understand the nice part is it slows traffic down, but maybe there's a compromise where we can still have traffic slowed down and have paved access from the last driveways out to Route 32.
So just out of clarification, are you asking us to maintain the dirt road differently, or are you asking have it paved?
Ideally, situation would be to pave from the last driveway coming in from Route 32.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Is there anybody else who wishes to address the council? Seeing no one, I will declare public comment closed and turn now to Mr. Aylesworth for the report of the town manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess it was actually a week ago Friday, myself, Madam Mayor, and other representatives from the town took part in our latest meeting with UConn's interim president, Marich, as well as some of her senior aides, to talk about our shared framework for economic development and talk about projects that each of us have going on and some shared goals that we have. So those continue to be productive discussions that we're having with the University of Connecticut. In a couple days, I will be presenting my 2022-2023 budget recommendations to the town council, both operating budget and capital plan. So stay tuned for a fun, exciting, and dynamic evening on Wednesday. I wanted to report for the good of the full council that staff have been coordinating closely with representatives from Collier's project leaders and TSKP Studios. That's our project manager and architect on the new elementary school building project. We've been working with them to compile information related to concerns that were raised by Councilor Coleman about some of the physical site characteristics at Southeast School. And so I'm expecting that probably by the end of this week, we'll have information to share on that front with the larger group. On behalf of Youth Services, I know a number of council members were very interested and enthusiastic about setting up the proposed Regional Youth Justice Diversion Program Board, and that board was recently constituted after the council authorized it, and the first case was heard this past week. The first convening of the group happened this past week. So first of many important actions that board will have in front of it under its belt. Most folks are probably aware, but on behalf of Sergeant King, I wanted to let folks know that we did have a high-profile call on March 18th. Our branch of Bank of America, Middle Turnpike, was robbed. It was actually believed to be the second bank that this particular duo, male and female duo, second bank robbery of the day. And so at this point, it sounds like, based on what's been publicly reported, that the male that was driving the getaway car has been detained, and they're still trying to ascertain the identity of the woman. Obviously, bank robberies are not that common in town. You hope they don't happen at all, but major crimes that the state's been actively investigating and making headway. Also wanted to let the council know that Sergeant King is actually being promoted. He's becoming a lieutenant. I think he's been with us, about 9 months now, something like that. And this is, I think, something that we're going to experience probably pretty frequently. There's a lot of vacancies right now in senior management in state police, lieutenants, captains, majors on up. And so I think it's likely that we'll continue to see this happen with any future sergeant that we have in place. There has been a sergeant named, Sergeant Merrill, and look forward to meeting with him in the near future. But Sergeant King was a good fit. I think he understood the culture of the town and what it is to do the work of a resident trooper supervisor in the resident trooper's office in a college town. And so he'll be missed, but we have reason to believe he might be lieutenant, the commander in Troop C out of Tolland. So in which case his relationship will continue on with the town, overseeing whatever resident trooper supervisor is ultimately named. And I think the last thing I just want to let folks know, if you use the town's GIS at all, the Geographic Information System, the parcel viewer, I know I can kind of geek out on some of this stuff, I enjoy using GIS, and I'm really excited that the town has shifted vendors and shifted platforms. We got a lot of, I think, really good years out of Main Street GIS, but working with CAI Technologies on a new platform, I think folks are going to find that the new public GIS that's available, web-based GIS on the town's website, is very, very user-friendly. If you haven't had a chance to go on the website and check it out yet, I encourage everybody to do so. I will end my verbal report there and field any questions.
Questions for the town manager, Mr. Coleman?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I noticed renovation to the town hall, $888,000, the old town hall I'm talking about. How large are those buildings? How many square feet are we talking in renovations?
I sort of deliberately left off my report because I thought the mayor was going to speak to this, so I don't know if maybe we could table a particular question until that happens out of a courtesy to the mayor. I don't know. I don't want to.
You don't want to steal my thunder.
I was trying not to steal your thunder by covering it in my report. I put it in the written report, but I was going to let you speak to it in the meeting. So,
If you allow me to ask that at a later time, that would
Sure.
be fine.
Sure. Anybody else? Questions?
I still have a question.
Yes.
The school conditions, the site conditions that I brought forth to the council. I want to thank you for putting them forward and getting some answers. I hope we get some answers soon. I think it's very important that this council work together in a bipartisan way. I've reached out to the mayor and the deputy mayor. I think this is a very important issue. I think it should be discussed on the council level, and I think we all need to work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the town manager? Well, then I will begin by saying I had great pleasure of being invited by Representative Haddad to a special presentation at the Mansfield Historical Society last week. Deputy Mayor Shaken joined me to celebrate and announce the awarding of $834,000 bond authorization for the repair of the two buildings that constitute the old town hall and the old meeting hall. Both of these buildings have very significant needs. We think of them as being the Historical Society, but they are town buildings, and they are our historical record. Aside from the fact that they house significant collections of information about Mansfield, they also are themselves the historical record of town government. From the meeting house, which was built in the 1840s, to the town hall, which was built in the 1930s. Both of them are really important buildings. Both of them have very significant water issues and other kinds of repair issues, which the town has not addressed over the years. So thanks to the Mansfield Historical Society, which did a great deal of work on putting together proposals and documentation for needs, had been applying for financial aid from the State Historical Preservation Organization for a couple of years. But they were able to persuade the governor and our representatives that this was a need that Mansfield independently could not fund, but that the state could. And so I'd like to really thank the members of the Historical Society for the great work they've done, and also say how much I'm looking forward to seeing these buildings salvaged, because they are in such bad condition, salvaged and to some extent restored, so that we could continue with the historical preservation and presentations that they have done such a good job on. So that's my first statement. My second is that I attended Asian Night at the University of Connecticut last night. This was a show which was put on by students from the various organizations of Asian students, from the Chinese Academic Scholarship Society through the Japanese Society, and a Asian fusion choral a cappella group. And I must say, the evening was astonishing, and I would like to thank those students for the really phenomenal performances that they mounted. And I hope that they take some of those performances into the Mansfield Town Square, Betsy Patterson Square, when we have opportunities for student performances. It was like watching a series of professional dancers, singers, martial artists. It was truly amazing. So those are my comments. Other members of the council have comments. Mr. Coleman first, followed by Mr. Osberger.
I do have some comments, but may I ask Madam Mayor about the $888,000 that is going to be spent?
I don't think it's 888. The grant coming is 834. I believe we have set aside $50,000 as matching funds in our capital projects.
I think I read $888,000. How many square feet are we renovating between the two buildings?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but there are several floors in the old town hall. There's a basement, a main floor, an upper floor, an attic, and a cupola. So I don't know how you add those up. I'm sure that the materials which were prepared by the Historical Society include that information.
Okay. What is the cost per square foot, do you think, to renovate historical buildings?
I have no idea.
Okay.
What I do know is that the Historical Society put together documents which were convincing, not only for their local legislators, but for the governor's office and the bond commission. And I think if you look at those documents, you will see that kind of information.
Okay. I think I support restoring historical buildings. I think it's a fabulous idea. It sounds like you could, plate them in gold for $888,000.
The real problem is water, and it's not just restoring the building, it's actually redesigning the slopes of the land, creating sewer systems that drain water away from the building itself. It's plus there are a whole bunch of individual projects like a roof, rebuilding the supports for the cupola, just many, many different pieces to it.
Could you provide me the report from the Historical Society?
I don't have it. I would suggest you ask the Historical Society.
I still have the floor. Okay.
I think I have a point of order.
No, this is still comment.
No?
This is still comments.
No.
All right. I just want to go over a little vocabulary with everybody and how words can have different meaning to different people. So I'd like to go over the meanings of words that I will use often. Colleagues. Colleagues to me is the entire membership of the council. It is not by party. And constituents is all the citizens of Mansfield, regardless of party. It is time for us to listen to our citizens about the road. I'd like to see that the town manager respond to all citizens' questions and concerns about the road. Not all have been addressed by the town manager or the council. Our spending on our senior citizens.
Excuse me, Mr. Coleman, I missed a word. Questions about what?
Questions about any concern a citizen
Okay,
has
I
should
wasn't
be
sure whether
addressed.
you said road or work or,
In this past request was roads, and some people were not answered by either the council or the town manager. So any questions or concern, I think, should be answered prior to a meeting. I think we really need to listen to our citizens about our roads, our spending, senior citizens, schools, and all the other issues have come up. I think they're falling on deaf ears. I spoke to town manager about some rocks on Chafeeville Road. Those rocks are still there. A citizen busted up his rims and flattened 2 tires down there, and there was no action taken on that. In the last meeting, we received emails in regards to ARPA funding. I received them at 7 o'clock. There was no way I had any time to review the emails and be able to answer the citizens' concern on ARPA funding. We are not listening to our citizens. It's time that we listen to our citizens. I'm disgusted at the fact that we allocated funding in the last meeting without listening to our citizens. Let's open up our ears, all of us together, and listen to our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. I would comment that very early in my term on the council, I also busted a tire and a rim on a rock on the side of the road. And I talked to Mr. Carrington about it. If we tried to remove all the rocks on the side of the road, it's an impossible task because we are a country town with narrow roads. And not only do we have rocks on the side of the road, we have trees that if we tried to cut down, people would be very upset. So, Mr. Shaken.
I have one item to report, but also a suggestion based on Mr. Coleman's questions around this project. So the State Bond Commission votes on Thursday. They haven't voted yet. This has been placed on their agenda. They're expected to approve it. They generally approve things that are on their agenda once the governor adds them. But I've been on the council long enough to have the benefit of at least 2 requests for this funding or portions of it from the Historical Society. And they've been very informative to me to understand the scope of the work. Obviously, the decision for the council to renovate these buildings has been happily taken away from us, and they'll be funded in almost their entirety by the state. But I think it might be helpful as we start thinking about scoping this project to have Bruce and others from the Historical Society, along with Alan, who is the technical overseer of these buildings as town buildings, to come and show us, again, with some of the documentation that they have, what some of the extensive issues are with them, because I think it would be helpful just for folks to understand the work that will commence there at a future date. So that's my suggestion. Turn your mic off. There's feedback if a few of us have our mics on at the same time. My report is actually about the Region 19 Reapportionment Committee. Ron and I, you were so grateful to appoint us several months ago. We've met twice, including right after the last council meeting 2 weeks ago, and I have a complicated and interesting report, believe it or not. So we have this very specific legal charge that's set forth by the State Board of Education every time there's a census, and the proportion of population between Ashford, Wellington, and Mansfield changes. The representation on the Region 19 Board of Ed can also need to change if there's been a shift in how the population has moved. And in this census, there was a shift based on the way that the board was voting. So this commission was put together, and at the last meeting, we learned that 10 years ago they did this, and Ron was on that committee, and they voted on a new way to apportion the votes of the members of the Board of Education. And then, for some reason, it was never implemented. And so, while it is true that based on the way the board is voting today, compared to the way it would need to vote based on the census numbers, our legal thing would kick in, and we'd have to do this if, in fact, we implemented what passed referendum in 2012, that we would be below probably the threshold by which that legal need for this commission would kick in. And so given that process, we are currently awaiting some more in-depth legal analysis from the State Board of Education and their attorney who's helping advise this group. I guess he's technically not providing us legal advice, but he's helping us figure it out. But the The long and the short of it is, if everything that I've just said is true, it is possible that there is actually no legal basis for this commission to be formed whatsoever, because we will not have tripped the threshold to reapportion. And the good news for those who are concerned is that in the last 10 years, there has been perhaps one vote of the Region 19 Board of Education that hasn't been unanimous or near unanimous. And so, and to everyone's knowledge, including Jim Mark, who's been chair of the board for that whole period of time, there's never been a vote in 10 years where the apportionment of representation would have needed to have been counted. But that's the details, and maybe we may meet again in a couple weeks, but we're sort of waiting on what the State Board of Education says we need to do.
Mr. Sharon, do you
I have
want
nothing to add to that, except surprise that what was done 10 years ago and approved in referenda in each of the three towns was not implemented. But it would not have likely been a matter of concern because, as Ben said, the decisions of that board, on which I served for 7 years, tended to be unanimous and very congenial. And so in the one vote that I could recall that was divided, that apportionment would not have made any difference in the.
Thank you. Well, I wish you both good luck. I'm not quite sure what that means, but good luck. Mr. Osberger.
Yes, from earlier. I just wanted a simple question of, was the date of the Asian festival you attended?
Saturday night.
Oh, it's last past Saturday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Coleman.
Are we, it doesn't seem as though we're discussing ARPA funding directly tonight on the agenda.
We are
I-
discussing a specific program.
Okay. I would like to see ARPA funding on the agenda so we can get our work done there. We don't have to rush into it. Thank you.
I believe we will be discussing individual programs as they are proposed. Anybody else with reports and comments? All right, Mr. Answorth.
I just wanted to add, the town has been asked to provide additional supplemental information about the Historical Society project. And so we've provided that to the state this morning, and so happy to share what we provided to the whole council.
Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, and there are two items: approval of the minutes of March 14th and appointments to town committees. Mr. Coleman?
Appointments to, I would like to pull appointments to town committees out of the consent agenda in case somebody here would like to speak on their appointment on the committee.
Let me ask, is there anybody here who wishes to speak to the appointments motion?
If
See-
there is not, I could accept the consent agenda.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Shaken, seconded Mr. Bruder. Any comments? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Consent agenda has been adopted unanimously. There is no old business, and our new business is the implementation plan for financial assistance to distressed households program, also known as RARE, Resident Assistant and Emergency Relief Program. Mr. Aylesworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At your last business meeting, the council acted through a series of motions on a number of the ARPA funding recommendations that staff had provided, and one bucket, if you will, of proposals is what I would call conditionally approved. And so this is an example of a conditionally approved program or initiative. The council wanted additional information on this proposal and the implementation plan surrounding it. So what you have before you is basically a first installment on what will be many implementation plans to come. But this has been assembled with staff support from Human Services and Planning and Development. As you indicated, we're proposing that this program, which is a financial assistance program to distressed households, in particular individuals and households that have experienced some economic challenges as a result of the pandemic. We're proposing that this be called RARE, Resident Assistance and Relief Program. And this is $150,000 as proposed in the recommendations that I provided to the council. And there is accompanying the agenda item summary. There are two documents, which hopefully you've all had a chance to look at. One is the policy document that sort of lays out qualifications and criteria and eligible uses, and the other is the proposed application form for this program. One item to note, well, a couple items to note, I guess. One is we're proposing that amongst the other criteria that are set forth, I want to make sure people know that we are proposing that household income be set at 200% of the poverty line. And so there's a chart at the conclusion of the policy document that shows U.S. poverty guidelines for 2022. So if you're curious what household income associated with different family sizes would qualify, that's laid out in the table. And second, I wanted to draw council's attention to actually the first page of the policy document, which lays out a very comprehensive list of bullets. These are the eligible uses of the funding. And this is basically extracted directly from the federal rule itself, the final federal rule for the American Rescue Plan. And upon further deliberation, discussions with staff, we're actually proposing, because this funding, frankly, we anticipate will go relatively fast. $150,000 is a lot of money, but it's also not a lot of money. That actually the program be more narrowly focused on the first 5 bullet points, and that would be rental arrears, utility costs or arrears, reasonable accrued late fees, and mortgage payment assistance. It's not that the other items aren't worthwhile. It's that we think that in the interest of prioritizing that, which is probably most important, those first 5 bullets could help us kind of constrain the universe of eligible requests. So I'll stop there unless I see Pat. Yep, she's coming to us live. So if the mayor's open to it, I would turn the floor over to Pat to fill in any gaps.
Ms. Schneider?
I am here just to answer some questions. I can tell you that some may know, many might not know that there have been in the past both rental and mortgage assistance program which have been suspended, and with the ending of the program to stop evictions. After the pandemic, we are seeing many more requests in our office regarding rental assistance and mortgage issues. We also are coming up to April, which means utilities shut off. So, and I think as you heard during the presentation of this program before, that we do have some people with quite high utility bills. So, so this is a very needed program. And again, I can see that it will be highly utilized. So we just want to make sure that the funds go to the most needy and actually it buys something for those individuals, which I think the policy addresses as well. We want to make sure that people have a plan, a responsible plan to go forward. So we don't want to, as they say, throw good money after bad. So if you have any questions or comments on the policy, we certainly are all ears.
I would like to note that the financial crisis must have been caused or magnified by the COVID pandemic, which is probably a limiting factor. Is that a limiting factor?
One would think that, but with what's happened with inflation and job loss and the costs of rents increasing, it's less limiting than one might think.
Thank you. Ms. Berthelot.
Thank you. I think this is terrific. Thank you for this. In terms of prioritizing, though, I wonder, I strongly think that the counseling point should be a higher up. It should not be, as I understood it, the top 5 were up on top, counseling now in Connecticut for an eviction, there's a legal right to an attorney. Most people don't know that. Most people also don't understand that there are legal rights for an eviction. So it's one of those things, I think, if folks were made aware of what their legal rights are on the front end, it could make all the difference, and we would not have people being evicted if they were aware of what their rights were. So I wonder if we could bump up the counseling to be a prioritized piece. And part of that, I would hope, would be information on our webpage about the rights of tenants and the rights of homeowners who are going to be foreclosed upon as part of that counseling, to have that information easily and publicly available.
Mr. Shuren.
Yeah, I also think this is a very good program, but I have a basic question. If people conform to these first 5 concerns, limited funding, the staff makes discretionary judgments as to who should get and how much. Is that correct?
That's correct. Go for it, Pat. If you want to explain.
I'm sorry. Yes, I mean, we have a current program called Neighbors Helping Neighbors that the policy is somewhat similar. Basically, what we do is work with the individual, and we work with other organizations and agencies out there too, to make sure not only that it's a realistic plan, but also so that we're maximizing the other resources that are available. So if you're talking about discretion, a lot of the counseling you were talking about happens both with our staff and with other agencies to try to make a workable plan. So we do that now. We just don't have funds to assist with mortgage and rentals at this point. And
If I can make sure I understand, somebody could come in with the set of needs, but because you have only a limited amount of funding, some people with those needs will have those needs, will receive the $1,500. Others will not be able to. Because of the limited amount of funding, somebody's making a decision that some people will get it in the full amount and some people will not. Is that what the staff will be doing?
No, because there's a maximum amount. So
Right.
the reason that the maximum amount was put in there so that we could help at least 100 households over the period of the program.
Perhaps
So
So if somebody's not within that 100, they would not be able to take advantage of this program.
correct, because we would use all the funds.
Right. And just my one other concern, UConn students living in university housing are not eligible. UConn
Correct.
students not living in university housing might be eligible?
Correct.
So
They're residents of the town.
So I think, one of the things staff will talk about is, working in language in the policy document, which doesn't necessarily exist yet, that makes it clear that, parental support, if you're listed as a dependent on somebody's taxes and you're receiving support from somebody, clearly that's not the sort of eligible case that we're contemplating. That said, we didn't want to have language in here that would preclude somebody just because they're a UConn student, they could be, middle-aged, going back, taking classes, working, and so by virtue of being a UConn student, we all might think of somebody who's 18, 19, 20 years old, but there are other cases, and so we want language that allows, staff discretion to evaluate the situation.
Parental concern, support is my.
Mr. Bruder, followed by Mr. Shaken.
Thank you, Mayor. I was curious to find out if this program is going to be a first come, first served, or is it going to be open for a period of time and then, assess all the applications we have and make a determination?
My feeling would be, in my judgment, that it would be in existence as long as it lasted. I'm not sure that I don't think we're going to find 100 families that rush in to take advantage of this right away. The funds should last for a period of time. But again, it's going to be what I would call a rolling application, like a number of our other assistance programs are.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Just to further on that, do you plan on awarding funding to families based on those first few criterias and then going back if they have lesser criterias included with their funding requests, or as you said, rolling admission is the only thing I can think of right now. But with that rolling application process, will you be determining the whole application and then moving on to the next family type deal?
Yes, and that's the way our current application process works when people come into us with problems or issues that they need. I will also say that we will be working with our partners to make sure we're not duplicating with other programs as well, which is what we currently do. We want people to maximize the amount of, maximize what they are eligible and able to get, but we also are striving towards self-sufficiency. So, you know, so we're trying to help people make realistic plans.
Yeah, I appreciate that information. I like the way the process sounds like it's going to play out. Thank you.
Mr. Shaken, followed by Mr. Coleman, followed by Ms. Berthelot.
Thanks. Just a couple of questions. So looking at the qualifications, it looks like you have an asset test, an asset limit where assets must not exceed $5,000. What's in and what's out in terms of assets? Are you considering vehicles and homes, or are you only considering sort of cash or other liquid assets?
Liquid assets are what we consider currently with our programs. I think it's listed on the application. Again, we have our Neighbors Helping Neighbors has current similar language.
Thanks. And then on the eligible uses, you have both rent and rental arrears. So if someone were a current resident who was current on their rent but had experienced financial loss due to the pandemic, would this fund be available for prospective future rent, or is it really focused on folks who may have an arrear balance because they were unemployed for a period of time during the eviction moratorium and have stayed in their dwelling but haven't yet been evicted due to that balance, or is it both?
So it really is about helping someone either get or retain what they already have. It's not a matter of projecting future costs. So normally, you know, with any of these programs, what they pay is, you know, if someone doesn't have enough money to pay their rent this month, or if they're in arrears, if someone is having an issue with their current mortgage, or if they paid their rent, but they have some arrearage in late fees.
And then, thanks. And then finally, I understand 1,500 being 1/100th of 150,000, and so it's sort of a target of 100 families. But in your experience dealing with folks who have financial needs that would qualify for this program, does that number match with what is it going to be a meaningful help? Is kind of what I'm getting at. Is $1,500 enough for someone who has a rental arrear situation or a utility cost arrear situation, something like that? That's pandemic caused 2 years into this, or is that not going to sort of help them in the outcome of their situation?
So, and I think that if it's not going to be of any assistance at all, it wouldn't be appropriate use of the funds. So let's say someone had a $6,000 utility bill, and they don't have enough money to pay the next utility bill that they have. To give them $1,500 toward a bill that's not really going to even buy them anything doesn't make sense, if you know what I'm saying. This, you know, $1,500 absolutely would help. In fact, we just have been working with a family, you know, currently this week, just to be honest, that the $1,500 would have paid their security deposit into a new place. They weren't getting evicted, but their lease was not being renewed, which is happening in town quite a bit. And but because they wouldn't be getting their security deposit back from their place until they needed to be in to a new place, these funds, and the person had lost hours due to pandemic, so they'd gone through their savings. So that's a good example of where this would have a very meaningful impact on a person's life in a pretty stressful time. So so I think it won't be the answer for someone who owes $10,000 in back mortgage payments, you know, but it absolutely will be the answer for somebody like I just described.
And then last question, if we sort of go forward with this, if the program is instituted, can you or Ryan or both sort of talk about what your outreach plan would be to make sure that this information gets to the people who take advantage of it?
Right. Again, we certainly would be talking to the agencies that we work with that would be referring to us for this. I mean, several already know that this is possibly in the pipeline and have made contact with our office. We also would publicize it, how we do all of our programs, including Neighbors Helping Neighbors. We would have to be a little bit concerned and make sure that we didn't advertise it in a way that people thought it was open to people other than Mansfield residents, because I think we would be inundated with applications, because this is pretty different from other municipal programs in other areas that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of any other municipality who's doing this program right now. And the need is pretty great. But we would publicize it. I'm sure that the town manager's office would publicize it both through Facebook, through all of the other ways that we publicize our social service programs as well. And like I said, word of mouth. Believe it or not, word of mouth here in town is huge. So that would be a big part of it as well. But again, I think that word will get out, and we will definitely become pretty busy with this program. There's a lot of need out there.
I was just going to add that we've also obviously come a long way and learned a lot about the Helping Hands program rollout in terms of how we got the message out on that. Some things that worked quite well, some things that maybe didn't work as well. So we would also learn from that experience and lean on that experience in our planning and development office.
Mr. Coleman, followed by Ms. Berthelot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Financial impact. Current proposal is to authorize the use of $150,000 of the town ARPA funding allocation for the purpose of administering a financial assistant program. Is this $150,000 for administration fees or the program itself?
I believe it's the program itself, from everything we have heard. It's $150,000 will go to 100 households at $1,500 a household.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Ms. Berthelot.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, I think this is a terrific idea, and I very much support it. I want to reiterate the importance, I think, of the counseling component, and even to the point of as Pat mentioned before, it might be that somebody is in arrears for $10,000. The fact that could be negotiated down, having a mindset of sort of trying to get people on their feet, I think, is super important. That said, also, I have a worry that that maybe we'll be too late on this. And I heard Pat just say a minute ago, there's a lot of need out there. How do we know that the need is out there? And do we know that there will be people who will be able to take advantage of this? My worry is that, people are getting back to work, that we're getting further and further away from being able to easily say this problem was caused by COVID. And I guess that gets to my next question. I see in the application that you have to say that it was caused by COVID. I mean, how causal does it need to be? And who will be making that judgment?
What I can say is, and again, with our experience with the Helping Hands program, which we had some challenges with that in the beginning, and then found that really, first of all, just about everybody's been impacted because the cost of living has gone up, utility costs have gone up, rents in town have gone up incredibly for various reasons. And we know that people have had some loss, if not, substantial loss of income from it. So even though it may feel like it's a distance away, we still are, just about everybody's feeling the impact of the pandemic with inflation. So it isn't as hard to document as one may think.
That's super helpful. So will a staff person sit down with the person who's applying and help them make the particular sort of logical connections that you made? Or will this be
Yes.
something that'll get mailed out and the person will have to figure it out themselves?
No, in fact, if you'll notice in the application, there's a whole section for the social worker who sits down. It's very much a a direct conversation with probably multiple referrals that happen, like you were talking about the counseling pieces, because there are organizations and agencies that do consumer credit counseling that are available out there that we do refer to as well now. But yeah, so there will be a whole discussion, and again, creating kind of a collaborative partnership with other organizations and entities that may be able to help the family. It also is a way to help people apply for other programs and services that they may be eligible for to lessen their, to lessen the impact of their financial challenges.
Thank you.
There's a motion on page 25. Mr. Osberger? Go right ahead, and then Mr. Katzenberger.
Hi, Pat. I'm just curious how the word is getting out for this program. We saw the pratfalls on the Helping Hands program. I'm curious how this is going to get the word out to the people that are needy in our town.
Well, we'll use, again, the things that we always use. As you know, our office has a lot of linkage with people already who are struggling financially. So it's kind of a good place, because people do come to us and we get people referred to us who are having financial struggles. But as far as the word, we can do it with flyers that go out. We can do it with announcements that go out. We can do it in many and various ways. We're hoping to, though, keep as much of the money itself into going directly out to individuals versus spending a lot of money on the administrative component of the program. That's why I said 100 families, because my goal is to not spend any or very little on administrative costs, so that more of it goes into the hands of the people who need it. So, but yes, we'll do the utmost we can to get the word out as far as it can go without confusing people who may think that that people from other towns can come forward for the funds. That's always the challenge with this type of program. If you do for publicity at a level where we're getting calls from Norwich or Manchester asking for the program. So we don't want to have a bunch of people out there thinking that this is a statewide program.
Mr. Katzenberger?
Thank you. I mean, I also certainly support this program. Terry made a comment, and I wanted to follow up on, because it was interesting, and among others, of course. And that is, did you mean negotiate down the total amount, which could be very useful? So, for example, there's a $2,000 utility bill, $1,500. I mean, I think that can provide added benefit. I don't see that. I might have missed it in a proposal, but who would do that? Would we ask the town to do it, which has its own issues and advantages, or is this an expectation of the individual, or that we would simply suggest it to the individual that your bill is $2,000, we can only give you $1,500, but you should negotiate yourself? I mean, obviously the town has more leverage. Whether it should be used that way is a separate question.
I don't want to speak for council member, but I interpreted it to say that there are services out there that one could retain counseling services to help with their situation, and that those services would come with a fee perhaps, and that this program could be used to offset those professional
And
services.
I wasn't
those fees are
imagining-
usually pretty reasonable too. The consumer credit counseling, they're nonprofits
Right.
that are out there for that. So that is a possibility. I just wouldn't want people to think we pay the fee for some of the, what I would call fraudulent people out there that you see the commercials on there. We can negotiate your, you know what I mean?
No
Settlements
credit repair
down. So
shops.
that I wouldn't want to get involved in, but there are some reputable, reasonable consumer credit counseling organizations that are nonprofits out there.
And my suggestion was only that the counseling would be, these are legal rights, these are the services that are out there, just getting people aware that this is, that this $1,500 is fantastic, but there's even more that can be done. A lot of people have no idea how to approve those things.
I think that's actually very important, because that can really extend and really significantly.
I haven't recognized either of you. You're just talking. All right, anybody else? Are we ready for a motion? Mr. Shaken, are you raising your hand?
I will make the motion. I move to authorize town staff to move forward with implementation of the RARE program using ARPA funds as presented.
Do I have a second? Ms. Berthelot seconds. Further discussion, Mr. Shaken.
Just to say, in the discussion period, I think this is a great program. I'm happy this is the first program that we're considering implementation of after our vote 2 weeks ago. It's overdue, and that's our fault. And so I'm looking forward to it. I will just make a request, which is that we get, in one way or another, some fairly regular sort of progress updates, because as you all know, we've left a fair portion of dollars unallocated, and my thinking as a counselor, at least, that if you get 100 applications in the next week and everybody could really use more than $1,500, that of all the long list of things that we've thought about and decided to spend money on, many of which are things that during the normal course of business we would rightly spend tax dollars on and have replaced those dollars with federal dollars, that this would be something that we would consider increasing our allocation towards if there was in fact a need that was greater than this $150,000 need in town. So I'm glad to get it off the ground, hopefully now, so we can get that information over the course of the next few months and get a better understanding of a sort of computation of the level of need that's out there, so that we could potentially adjust any of our decisions on other funding or on unallocated funding to address them. So thank you. I hope my fellow councilors will support it.
Mr. Coleman?
Yeah, I agree with Councilor Shaken on that. If more funding is needed, absolutely, we should look at that. Also, Councilor Berthelot mentioned the urgency of this. I'd like to see it get pushed forward quickly and get moving on it. Thank you.
Are we ready to vote? Is there anybody who wishes to abstain? Is there anybody who wishes to vote in the negative? Then everybody raise your hand if you're voting in the positive. We have adopted this proposal unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Schneider, and for the very good work. And you can see we are willing to follow this and assist if possible. All right, the next item on our agenda is the Economic Development Commission presentation. Mr. Farino, Ms. Van Zelm. We have a note on our desks that you have to speak directly into the microphone. If you turn away, you are not being heard. So, especially since you have a group. So this is the Economic Development Commission's annual report, and Farino, as chair of the commission, would you proceed?
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for having us here this evening. I think we missed it last year due to COVID, so it's nice to be back in front of you all. It's really nice to be back in Town Hall again. I'm Steve Farino. I'm the chair of the Economic Development Commission. This is Kristen Delay. She's the vice chair. Other commissioners who are not with us tonight, Valessa Sauter-Klein, Nancy McKenney, Anthony Raggi, Lane Watson. Our mayor is ex officio, as is Councilor Coleman, who've been great additions to our commission. We very much value having them there, and we would not be able to get anything done without Cynthia right behind me there. So that kind of gives you the rundown of the cast of characters for our commission.
The next slide generally reflects the powers and duties conveyed by Section 17.8 of the Mansfield Code of Ordinances. We work to conduct research into the economic conditions and trends in Mansfield. We make recommendations to appropriate officials and agencies of the town regarding actions to improve Mansfield's economic condition and development. We coordinate activities and cooperate with unofficial bodies organized to promote economic development in Mansfield. And we work to advertise and promote economic development in Mansfield. And as always, one of our goals is to diversify the grand list. We look to help reduce the tax burden to homeowners in Mansfield. All right, so the EDC's mission. Number one, to support existing businesses in town, supporting changes to zoning regulations that reduce barriers to business growth, advocating for purchasing policies that support local businesses, and also meeting with local business owners to identify opportunities as well as concerns. We also look to focus development in targeted areas. And really, the 4 areas listed, Four Corners, North Eagleville, King Hill Road, downtown stores, and the Southern Gateway, are the areas that are targeted because those areas make sense since we want to maximize the use of already developed areas in town without impacting homeowners throughout our community. And of course, we're looking to recruit new businesses that make sense for Mansfield, implementing the positioning and marketing development plan, as well as providing information in an easy-to-use format to help businesses make location decisions. So if you see the Explore Our Town guide and the website currently, we look to offer new businesses information to help them be successful in Mansfield.
So now that we're back at it again after COVID has started to wind down, we have 3 main subcommittees that we have broken out our work plans for 2022. The first is our Business Support and Outreach Subcommittee. This is the committee that goes on the business visits with business owners and tries to find out what the current climate is like. This has been really very beneficial in the past for us. It's how we kind of keep a pulse on what's going on in town. It's what gives us the data to be able to make informed decisions when we provide feedback to either you, the town council, to planning and zoning, or various other committees or commissions that come before us with things for us to review. We're going to continue. One thing we'd like to try doing more of is contacting businesses that have left the area to find out why they left and see if there's any opportunities that we're missing, things we could do better or differently to retain businesses. We're going to continue to provide content for the Economic Development website, which we're working on redoing. We'd like to start providing more social media content to our town communications specialist to help promote Mansfield businesses, and we're would like to help, obviously, continue with assisting with town events that benefit. The second subcommittee that we have is our development review, development project review. This reviews draft regulations, for instance, when planning and zoning was rewriting the zoning regulations. And we also review development proposals similar to the Shepherd Project or the Haven Campus Project or the Eagleville Green Project, and try to make sure they're consistent with our principle, our EDC's guiding principles document, and beneficial to the town. Our third subcommittee is the government subcommittee, and its task is to recruit new members to the EDC and to develop our yearly budget. And we do have a couple of vacancies on our commission, so if you know of anybody who would be interested in serving, we're always looking for volunteers, so please get the word out if you can. Thank you.
The EDC and the Partnership Economic Development staff have continued to recognize the effects of COVID-19 on our businesses. And so there's been continued communication of the evolving federal, state, and local health and safety guidelines. We've provided printed and digital Mask Up Mansfield materials. I'm sure everyone has seen that around town at our businesses, which have been fantastic. There's been information shared about federal and state funding and private grant opportunities, which are very accessible online and I think have been used by many people throughout town as well as other communities. I know that. In early 2021, at the request of Town Manager Ellsworth, Partnership Economic Development staff coordinated the distribution of COVID-19 test kits to food establishments that requested them. That was fantastic. And also, we've been working toward discussions about ARPA funding plans and the inclusion of business support in that.
So what did we get done last year? 2 things that you can visually see are the new gateway signs at the northern and southern ends of town. We also distributed 3,100 copies of our Explore Our Town guide. This has been fantastic. I hope you all got a copy of it. This, it's a kind of Meet Mansfield piece, and I've been distributing it a lot to my clients, and I know other realtors have as well. Been very, very well received by people who aren't familiar with our town, because it kind of gives you a quick taste of what Mansfield is and what it has to offer. We signed the contract with, or we didn't, but the town did, with the development signage and gateway signing plan. We've developed guidelines for endorsing projects and business proposals, and we reviewed, updated, and approved our new bylaws.
Okay. Further accomplishments from 2021, we continue to review development proposals, and we work with Linda Painter. She's often attending our meetings to update us on current proposals and give us information that can help assist the town in decisions that they're making. Also, the four-town team from Bolton, Coventry, Mansfield, and Tolland were represented by our town manager, Yukon Senior Director of Operations in the President's Office, Kara Workman, and our Partnership Executive Director, Cynthia Van Zelm. We continue to work on implementation of that action plan. So looking at the matrix of regional assets, developing the regional community calendar policies, and of course the meetings with the stakeholders. And most of the last few months have been spent on those meetings, including Wyndham and Tolland County Chambers, the Last Green Valley, and to determine where there's overlap in tasks and where the four-town team can partner with these entities. Very exciting. Held the inaugural Mansfield Willimantic Restaurant Week, February 21st to March 6th, 2022. Very exciting that 17 food establishments participated, including 8 from Mansfield. Those from Mansfield included Coyote Flaco, Dog Lane Cafe, Fenton River Grill, Fresh Fork Cafe, Gansett Wraps, Hops 44, Little Aladdin, and Sticks and Stones Marketplace. Surveys have been sent to the restaurants for their feedback, but the anecdotal responses have been very positive from the businesses, and it sounds like it was very successful for the patrons as well as for the restaurants. That was great. And it continues because there will be a Taste of Mansfield Champion Award that is currently being reviewed by the EDC, and we look forward to presenting that soon. The Taste of Mansfield also pivoted efforts to focus on connecting low-income residents with local farms. So we're building off of that long agricultural history of Mansfield and promoting our local farms and local food champions. So our 2022 goals are, number one, to continue to promote our opportunity zone, including Four Corners, as well as other areas for development in Mansfield. And again, we usually, when we're having discussions about prospective developers and businesses, we do this in conjunction with Linda Painter, the town's Director of Planning and Development. Under the umbrella of the Four-Town Action Plan, there's already been a beginning to the series of webinars for small businesses. So the first was held on March 23rd, and this is to assist small businesses that are interested in connecting with Yukon interns and job seekers. The town's economic development website is also being updated, and it will be reformatted this summer. We're very excited about that. As Steve had mentioned before, we're reinstituting the business visits, so that will be something that we plan on really starting again this spring and going into the summer. And then also continued coordination with Yukon on economic development.
We'd like to see the completion of the signage and wayfinding plan that we've already begun with. I would like to continue to implement the town's positioning and marketing development plan as well. One thing that I'm beyond excited about is the community calendar, which is something that I've been advocating for I've lost track of how many years now, but one thing that I hear a lot day to day is Mansfield's such a quiet town, there's nothing to do. And I truly know that that's not the case, but there's not one place you can go to find out all of the many things there are here. And I think this would be such an immensely helpful thing for our town because we have so many resources. We outpunt our coverage really in terms of things we can offer to our residents, but we got to get the word out. And having one singular place where we can do that will really help make it just that more impactful. We'd like to continue distributing the Explore Our Town guide, as those have worked out really well. And then, as Kristen mentioned, identifying the inaugural Taste of Mansfield Champion, which Councilman Coleman is volunteered to that. Yeah.
All right, so our budget proposal for this coming year, continued consulting agreement with the Mansfield Downtown Partnership to provide economic development services. This $40,000 continues to fulfill its current contract with the town to provide economic development services, and this is currently in the second year of the second 3-year contract. We're looking for $50,000 to continue implementation of the town's positioning and marketing development plan. And this includes implementation of comprehensive media to promote Mansfield, marketing materials, photos, printed, possible videos, attracting visitor benefits, our businesses, and showing off Mansfield as a great destination that it is. We want to continue to work with partners in the tourism industry at the state and in the region. So again, we can show off what Mansfield has to offer and encourage people to stay here and to spend the day or plan a trip here. Also, $5,000 to support the Taste of Mansfield, which will cover staffing, promotion of the Taste of Mansfield mission, photography, videography, as well as the Taste of Mansfield Champion Award. And finally, $750 for EDC memberships, training, and activities.
And then in conclusion, recommendations or requests we have for council, just continue to support the marketing initiatives to promote Mansfield to new businesses and new residents. Support the work of the Ad Hoc Committee on Affordable and Workplace Housing. Please help continue to support the 4-town vitality plan, Mansfield, Coventry, Bolton, and Tolland. And then continue to work in a synergistic and mutually beneficial way with UConn. I know we've had some bumps along the road, but all signs point to a renewed relationship that hopefully will be mutually beneficial, and we are neighbors. Rather than be adversarial, it'd be great if we could get into a more congenial. So, with that, we know you have a long agenda, so we'll yield the floor.
Questions for the Economic Development Commission? Mr. Katzenberger.
Thanks. Thank you very much, both for the report and for all the work you've done. 2 questions. The first, I'll just go through both of them real quick, and then however you want to answer. The first is, on the stores downtown, there's, it was true before COVID, but of course, particularly now, there's a fair number of openings or vacancies in the buildings. Could you comment, and that's also the part, the responsibility of the Mansfield Downtown Partnership, which you work with, but could you state more specifically what is going on, what are the plans there to bring in new tenants, retail or tenants to those areas? And then the second question is, this is, bringing in, even as you know, 1 or 2 businesses can easily, the benefits of that, which are multiple, can easily exceed, the costs of even the full marketing plan. So without knowing whether we would give any more money, is there additional money or additional specific projects that you would like to do that you think would be beneficial that need more money? Because this is a good time to ask.
We could always use more money.
What the specifics?
I think, off the top of her head, I think what I would love to do, we had done these business visitation surveys. I think we had a little over 100, like 117 of these that we had done pre-COVID. And we learned a lot through them. And so unless there's something that I'm blanking on, which is entirely possible, I think once we start doing those visits and we start meeting with business owners and seeing what's going on, and hearing from multiple different people, we could give you a much more informed answer to that question. Regarding your first question about tenants, one of the issues that I have, people say, oh, there's so many vacancies in the downtown. I don't know when the last time you went to Evergreen Walk was.
Oh, but that's the worst. That's terrible.
It's unbelievable. And so I'm not sure that our downtown has fared any worse than anywhere else. In fact, I'm not sure we fared as bad as other places. But the tenanting strategy has been being addressed more so by the Mansfield Downtown Partnership. There's a subcommittee there that's looking specifically at that, working with property owners and leasing agents. And they definitely have, leasing agents definitely have strategies. Each of them has kind of their own take on it, and the MDP is definitely working more directly than that than we are as the ED.
Thank you.
Ms. Berthelot?
Thank you, Mayor. Love the Explore Our Town Guide. I'm wondering if we're getting it in the hands of the human resources people at UConn for new coming faculty and staff.
Ms. Van Zelm, would you join us?
Thank you, Counselor Berthelot. Yes, we did a real big push last year with HR offices. So we went to UConn, we went to Natchog Hospital, we went to Wyndham Hospital, the town and the schools' HR departments as well. We also went to Eastern, we went to, trying to think, we had a hard time because it was in the middle of the pandemic getting through to all of the other colleges in the area, but we did a real big push with HR offices, and we did go to new faculty and staff office as well.
Terrific, thank you. Yeah, that's often what I'm hearing is that there's a disconnect, that folks are learning about other towns before they learn about Mansfield, and so bringing them in when they're young and their kids get to go to our excellent schools, and then they'll stay, which is, of course, what we want. Thank you. Can I ask one more question?
Go ahead.
This may be outside of your realm of either the work you do or knowledge, but one complaint I often hear is that the rents are simply too high. And I don't know if that's true or not. We'll, for the sake of argument, say it is, particularly for local folks who might want to start a business or keep a business there. And of course, we don't set the rent. The town has nothing to do with the rent, so we have no control over that. But is there something else we could do in terms of, I don't know, tax breaks to the owners of the properties in return for lower rents for local businesses, or something like that an option?
Not one that we've actively considered yet. We had a number of recommendations made by, oh, let me, I think it was, yeah. Well, anyways, we had a number of recommendations. They gave us kind of a menu of options that I think it was pre-COVID, and then it kind of went by the wayside. So nothing that comes to mind right now. I think what I see more is a lack of space than, and like you said, everything will adjust as to the market. So I know the anecdotal reply is that downtown is too expensive, the rents are too high. But there's other places in town where it's quite a lot less. So maybe to be downtown, it's more expensive, but other places where it would be less expensive.
When the pandemic hit, and this is related to the downtown, but also to our larger commercial areas, we reached out to all the major property owners, major commercial property owners, and we asked them to think about relief to their tenants. And, we heard back from a couple of them, and they did, in fact, negotiate some reduced rent. So I know that they were very conscious of doing that. There may be some things through the ARPA funding, too, that could help moving forward once we get to that piece on the council's agenda as far as the business assistance. There's a few property owner incentives that the council may want to take a look at, similar to what was done in Hartford.
I know, like Hartford, and I know Providence many, many years ago decided what it wanted to do was bring in artists, right? So that they have reduced rates for people who are artists. Which, the city was able to coordinate. And I'm just thinking, if so many folks want local businesses to flourish. So if the focus could be, some sort of tax abatement for the property owner in return to a lower rate of taxes for local businesses. Just random thought.
I will remind Councilor Berthelot that the idea of tax relief was bitterly opposed by a number of members of the council, which is one of the reasons we didn't go there. Mr. Shakin.
Thanks. I wanted to talk about sort of outdoor recreation as an economic development engine, something that helps our businesses when people visit here who may not live here, something that might attract people to live here, et cetera. When you talked about sort of creating a community calendar of things to do, I just want you all to know on the EDC that the council has been talking with the Parks and Recreation Department about sort of a re-envisioning of how we think about recreation in town, and have authorized them to engage in a consultant to do a master plan. And one of my hopes from it is that there will be a similar kind of output at the end of the day, a centralized place you can go and find out what you can do outside in Mansfield. Right now, you have to decide whether you want to go to somewhere that the town owns, or somewhere that the state owns, or somewhere that Joshua's Trust owns. And you get various quality of information of where you can go and what you can do based on who that owner is. But all I want to do is go for a walk in the woods. I don't really care if it's a Joshua's Trust trail or a town trail or a Mansfield Hollow trail. So I think something like that might be a very helpful thing. It can be it could always be attached to, grab a bite to eat afterwards with some information about local business that you can patronize. But it's an interesting idea, along with the community calendar, because it's a big, what is there to do every day? Where can we go? Where's there a paved path? Where's there a path that's covered in snow right now? Those kinds of things that would be helpful.
I think you'll find that the four-town collaboration is really focusing on that. For
Can I
all,
make one more comment, Madam Mayor, when you're done?
Please.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
go ahead.
So the itineraries, which I think you're referring to, we're doing that both at the regional level and at the town level. That was one of the recommendations out of the recently approved Downtown Stores Action Plan, Strategic Action Plan. So that's a big piece of it. The signage will also go a long way of directing people to some of the things that you mentioned, Councilor Shaken. So that's something also that should be done in August. And so that'll be a real great way to direct people where we hope they'll go and stay in Mansfield.
Other councilors have questions? Mr. Bruder?
I just wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you so much for all the work that you've done, both for our town, but also for the businesses. And I appreciate the fact that you've highlighted a recommendation to the council to support the work of the Affordable Housing Committee. Because as we've heard, if we can get more people to be able to stay here, that whether they're aging out of the housing that they currently have or are looking to come in, at the ground level and bring their children and be part of the community, I think that that goes a long way in terms of diversifying some of what the EDC members are looking forward to. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you very much for all of your good work. Mr. Coleman?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Are you tipping your hat to me? Is that what that gesture is?
I believe in old day respect, Madam Mayor.
Oh, I see. Okay. I thought old day respect was you didn't wear your hat indoors, but that's another question.
I'm very happy to be on the EDC. I look forward to doing a lot of interesting work and having some ideas. But I'm a little disappointed in the progress of how we move things along in the commission. We've been talking about owner engagement here for a few months. I feel as though I should be out there engaging the owners now. I would like to see maybe the commission try to move things along a little quicker so we get more done in a year. I think we can do that. Also, I believe we canceled our April meeting. I would like to see a meeting in April. I mean, just to cancel a meeting and not have an alternate date when we have so much work to do. I would request a meeting in April. Thank you.
Okay, one of the proposals for ARPA funding is support for businesses, and I hope that we hear some reaction from the Economic Development Commission or some participation in developing that program. We need to figure out a way to be purposeful and effective with that money. So, well, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Maybe you get to see the end of the women's basketball game, which we are all missing. Okay, next item on the agenda is Public Works, with a particular focus on road resurfacing and drainage projects. Mr. Carrington, Mr. Lavoy, Mr. Delage, Mr. Aylesworth, you want to introduce this part of the program?
Happy to, Madam Mayor. The council, I think at a variety of different meetings, has expressed an interest in hearing from the Public Works Department a little bit more on the longer-term vision for roads and road surfacing. And given that we're gearing up for the capital project discussion as part of the larger budget season, it seemed like it'd be a good time for Mr. Carrington, his team, to walk the council through what, the priority setting process is, what the 5-year plan looks like, different programs, both, paved roads, gravel roads, off-road, things that we're doing. And again, help inform the council's budgeting process in the weeks ahead. And also just help the citizens understand, from a proactive standpoint, from a preventative maintenance standpoint, exactly what it is that the town does. So I'll go ahead and queue up presentation.
I hope we haven't lost our member who is particularly interested in this. Okay. Welcome back.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's good to be back, and it's good to be on this side of the table. With me tonight is Brian Lavoie, the Operations Manager for Public Works, and Derek Delay, the Assistant Town Engineer. Hopefully he'll do as good as his better half just did. Let's see. That was his wife, if you didn't. I'm
Mr.
here.
Carrington, what does PE stand for?
Professional engineer.
Professional
So
engineer.
Derek and I are licensed professional engineer. It's a requirement for the position. So Tim Viette, who's in our office, is also a professional engineer. It's not required for his position, but he is. And so I'm coming tonight based on, there was a lot of emails a couple months ago from Brookside Lane, but we get a lot of complaints, not just from Brookside Lane. I've gone through a list: Elise Road, Maple Road, Timber and Thomas Drives, Davis Road, Fern Road, East Road, Elizabeth, Hunter's Run, just a few in the past couple months. It's been a bad winter with frost heaves and all that, so I've got a lot of complaints. Unfortunately, for the two gyms in back, Coach Gym and Firefighter Gym, that talked about Coventry Road, I'm not going to be talking about gravel roads tonight, but I did recommend to both of them that they do come to the council to talk about their concerns, that maybe paving it up to the last driveway will still keep Coventry Road a unpaved road in certain areas, but for the kids getting off a school bus and stuff like that, they won't be stepping into 6 inches of mud, which can't be too comfortable. So, somehow we got ahead. So how we select the road to pave, it depends on how much we get budgeted. I guess I got to stay closer to this. So first it comes with whatever the council gives us for a budget, determines how much we have to pave and fix drainage. And then we look at drainage, so we try to select roads where we don't have to do too much drainage work. Our practice has been, since I've been here, and we've fixed drainage. We don't just replace what's there. If we need to add new, we add new. We do things to make sure the road will last for 25, 30 years. Our current focus is primarily on collector roads. Those are roads that bring you to the state roads, more or less. So they're the well-traveled roads, not the neighborhood roads. If there's a neighborhood road in the vicinity of where we're paving a collector road, we try to do that at the same time if there's funds available. And we do a neighborhood road in very poor condition that we had a lot of pothole patching last year. We did Birchwood Heights because it was in pretty bad shape. So our current practice, and I think I went through this last time I was here, we consult our pavement management report that we did in 2015 to get the pavement condition index numbers. That's a number from 0 to 100. 0 is a total failure of a road, 100 is brand new paved road. We look at the complete streets policy to determine if we can do anything there. We look at other surfacing options. I'm going to talk about Cape Seals tonight in neighborhoods that have some good pavement conditions that don't require a total rebuild. And we also make sure we're in compliance with the MS4 stormwater management plan. And the types of rehabilitation we can use based from that study was a full depth reclamation, which is approximately $300,000 to $400,000 per mile. Mill and overlay, I have that in red because there's not a lot of roads we can do. You want a road that's in the 60 to 70 PCI range. That's one you want to mill and pave. We did do that on Boulder Drive a few years ago, but there's not too many where the drainage is in good shape where we can just take off 2 inches of asphalt, or the asphalt's not in good shape. We thought maybe we had 4 inches of asphalt. We only have 2, so if you take off 2, you have nothing there. So a mill and overlay is not a option that we have a lot of possibility for. An overlay is just putting new pavement on the existing pavement. That's 100 to 150,000 per mile. And then the seals, which I'll talk about later, and then crack sealing. We want to crack seal all roads to prevent water from getting in and creating these frost seas that we had this winter. So drainage is a big part of this. A road is more than pavement. You can see that our pavement's bad. Most of you can't see that our drainage is bad, but our drainage systems are old. Most of it's over 40 years and past its life expectancy. A lot of it is corrugated metal pipe. It's failing sooner than expected. It should last 60 years, but it's more like 40. The scaling of the coating comes away, and the in situ soil conditions are also corrosive in some areas. And they don't address the existing stormwater issues, so that's why we have to do some new work. And if we don't fix the drainage issues, then we're just wasting our money. We're going to put down a lot of new pavement, and the water's going to get through and destroy the road faster. Major crossings can be $400,000 or higher. We'll talk about Hillendale and others. We are currently experiencing failures on roads that aren't even on our 5-year schedule. Show some pictures of that, Codfish Falls being one of them. Right now, we do the work in-house with 2 drainage crews. That's a 3-person crew, excuse me, with a crew leader, a truck driver, and a laborer. And a major crossing like Hillendale Road was put out to bid. I'm going to turn this over to Brian. He can talk about some of the damage we've seen this past winter.
Hi, everybody. So this is Codfish Falls, 2 24-inch pipes going across. They were corrugated steel. Unfortunately, the steel rotted out, so we had to replace it immediately. Again, corrugated steel was good probably 30 years ago, was, good technology. Now we use ADS. We're hoping it does, that lasts 40 years. So that was Codfish Falls, corrugated steel. Again, this is the inside of the pipe. What happens is the water gets in there and it just rots it away. So if you see on the top of the pipe, it's like an asphalt membrane that goes around it. Well, what happens is when the sand goes through the pipe, it acts like sandpaper, it wears it out, brings it down to steel just rots. Gurleyville, another fine corrugated steel pipe, collapsed, kept on going. We did that pipe. It took my crew, our crew, town crew, 2 days to repair. We did a new basin, complete crossing with ADS, and it is now safe to travel.
What is ADS?
It's the plastic pipe.
Thank you.
Summit Road, great road. It's a scenic road. When they installed this pipe, it was, I'm not going to say it was installed wrong. It wasn't. Again, it's corrugated steel. So instead of the brook over time changed, and that happens. And what it did was it rotted away the head wall of the pipe. So we had to go in there and correct that. But over time, we are going to have to replace that corrugated steel. Town Hall parking lot. All right, so this was the one in the front. I don't know when it was installed. They've only been here 7 years, so I can't go back. I can't tell you who installed it. I can't say any of that. I can tell you that it failed around the pipe. When they concreted around it, it wasn't sufficient enough, and so the blocks came out. which allowed the sediment from the parking lot to go down. So we fixed that. And the next one, these are 2 catch basin tops. Those are in the rear of the parking lot. Over time, again, I don't know how long they were there. They could be 40 years old. I'm not saying that salt doesn't have an effect on concrete. It does. And this is what happens after 40 years. Currently, we use, these are our, we call them risers. So we order them so the pipe slides right in to the riser. It minimizes the concrete we have to use, and it's much more stable.
So the one on the upper right with the circle, that's the way they used to come. It was a bigger gap, and you can see we put in 2 pipes there. We have the stormwater pipe and the groundwater pipe there, and they have to be parged. All that concrete in that ellipse area had to be done by hand. With the new way, this isn't showing the other pipe, but just this one pipe, it's a lot easier just to parge around it. And the failure we saw at the town hall in the front, a couple slides back, we won't see with that. All right, next one. Some major drainage projects, those are pipes we're looking at there are small. There's some that are projects by themselves. They can cost anywhere from $100,000 to $500,000. One option we're looking at is a slip lining option. I'll show a picture of that next. There's these 3 locations that currently need attention, but as it says, there are many more. This was Hillendale Road Bridge. It was considered for slip lining in 1998. It was not done. It was replaced recently. Total cost was $530,000. The state covers almost half of that. Funding was identified in 2015. We applied for the bridge application in 2016, bid in 2020, and constructed in 2021. So sometimes getting an external funding, it's great that the state helps out, but it does prolong the process. So sometimes the cost goes up and the time goes up, but you do get some money from the state. Culvert slip lining, this is an example of you basically take a new pipe, put it inside the old pipe, and then you put concrete around it. So the bottom right picture is not of these 2, it's just an example of what would be. That's a smaller pipe than what's doing there. Obviously, this would need wetlands approval and all that. It's a big project. Something that's cheaper than digging up the road. You might be able to get through an area in 2 days instead of months like we were on Hillendale. So again, the rehab methods, the way we've been doing it right now is the full depth reclamation with a new drainage system, and that's the cost per mile. It's a little higher than the previous slide I showed, but we do it with, and that's including drainage. So before, the numbers were just the pavement itself. If we went to just replace the drainage systems that's there, so replace the catch basins, replace the pipe across, but don't do any new drainage work, we can get that cost down to probably $340,000 per mile, and that's only going to last 10 plus years. So you're cutting your life in half for not half the cost. If you overlay new pavement with the old drainage system, it's $160,000, and then we can look at how we used to do things with the double chip seal with leaving no drainage improvements, or a single chip seal, and those are the prices there and how long it lasts. The best method, the way we want to do it, is the top method, but I understand there's a lot of pressure to fix the roads. So if we want to take some risk and spend more money and get more things done, but we have to realize that it's not going to last as long. And make people happy, but it's be a short-term happiness. And this continuing on with that full depth reclamation, new drainage. We've been doing that since 2015. There's the pros and cons. I think that it's the best option to go with, but it's going to be the most expensive, and it's going to take a longer time. The full depth reclamation using the old drainage system, no improvements, is a good option, but again, it's not going to fix any drainage that's been discovered over the years. Things have changed where maybe the road that was built 50 years ago, the drainage doesn't work anymore. You need to put in some new drainage. And the overlay, old drainage, we did that on Bassage Bridge, the eastern portion, after you go through the reservoir area. It's a good rideability, but it's not going to last as long, and we didn't improve any drainage. And the two chip seal methods, what we did prior to 2014, you can do a lot more roads, but if the road's not in good condition, I think it's akin to painting rotted wood. And I've said that before. So if you have rotted wood and you paint it, it looks nice, but it's still rotten wood. The road may look good, but it's not. You're not really addressing the problem. Here's our current road network. So for collector roads, we basically have about 50 miles of collector roads and residential. So it's about a 50-50 split. The pavement condition index, they're in the 60s for the average. We have some that are way low and some that are, we just paved, so they're in the 100 or 90s. That's our current road network. If you see the orange, that's the state roads. So you can see 195 going north to south, and you can see 32 on the west side, 89 on the east side, 6, 275, 44 going east-west, 320. The darker color is our rural collectors, and then the lighter shade of gray is the rural local roads. And then there's some Yukon roads that are in blue, and down Freedom Green has some private roads, and there's other private roads. Here's all the collector roads. So these are roads, like I said, we like to concentrate on first because these get more people use them. So we want to fix the roads that more people use. The ones that are bolded are the ones that we have paved since 2015. See, there's a lot still out there.
You paved Mansfield
You're right.
City.
How did I miss that? Maybe because we didn't finish it. There's still that one section at the southern end. And here's the 5-year paving plan based on what we assume we're going to get for drainage and what things are going to cost, because we don't know. The cost of asphalt changes every year. The cost of pipes has gone, the drainage pipes and catch basins have gone up. But if you see for the coming fiscal year, we're assuming $1.6 million, and those are the roads in the gold. And that, again, is this season, because it's fiscal year. We're looking at this season and next spring potentially. So Mulberry and Olson is next spring potentially. Derek was showing Browns in Spring Hill that we hope to get to at the end of this season, hopefully August, September timeframe. And then the others are based on that forecast, depending on what we get done this year, what we get funded, all those numbers can change. But you can see at that rate, it's going to take us a long time to get to every road. There's a list of all the roads we paved. Mansfield City is on there. So, and one thing we'd like to look at is the use of a Cape Seal. We'd like to use it on the neighborhood residential roads, and they can't have severe drainage or puddling issues. Otherwise, it's just, like I said before, painting rotten wood.
What is a Cape Seal?
We're going to show you a video, Mayor, so good question. Next slide. Oh, we're going to show you. It's in there. So I guess the volume doesn't come through. But basically they're doing, like we did before, a chip seal, come through with oil, put down the chip or the rock, and then you come across with a microsurface. So when you're done, it's more of a paved surface. It's not as rough as the old, and Cape Seal, in case you didn't know, came from Cape Town, South Africa. We won't go through the rest of it, but it's just a different process. If you're interested, Google Cape Seal and you can watch that entire video. But we think it's better than the old chip seal. Neighborhoods would like it because, some of the complaints I know in Groton where they use chip seal, kids go out and ride their bikes in the neighborhood and they fall down, they skin their knee pretty bad on chip seal, where this has more of a paved surface. Good thing is you can get a lot done for, the $500,000 we're asking for. Concerns we get from citizens before and after. Before, we hear about potholes and frost heaves, the road shoulders are in disrepair, safety for pedestrians and bicyclists. After, we always hear that everybody's going faster now because you paved the road. I think people just pay more attention to it. I think people are going faster on a bad road, so they're probably safer. They shouldn't go fast at all, but they're probably safer going fast on a new road than an old road. The widths of the road, sometimes too narrow, too wide, depending on the opinion. Always, with the speed, can I get a speed bump in front of my house? We always hear that. And again, safety for pedestrians, bicyclists. So safety is always there before and after. We're aware of all those. We try to do the best we can. We can't, if we spend too much time on one road to make it perfect, we're preventing doing all those other roads, the whole list. That's the quandary we find ourselves in. And other considerations that we didn't talk about when you're paving is the curbing, the driveway aprons. That's the area where your driveway touches the road. Any sidewalks that are in the area, the signs, the striping, any street lighting, guide rails, and any utilities. So it's not as simple as just paving a road sometimes. Turn over for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Shaken.
Thanks. I have a few questions. So I'm glad to see the reference to the 2015 pavement study. That was one of my first things that we got when I joined the council 6 years ago. I'm curious that our sort of evaluation for road quality is still back to 2015. So that was an expensive study. I'm not asking
I'll let Derek answer
to redo it, but I've certainly noticed that was also roughly around the time that we stopped the practice of chip sealing. That's correct, right? And so I've noticed even on roads that, used to look like painted rotted wood every few years, that there's some significant deterioration. The chip seal's gone on Gurleyville Road and back down to the asphalt underneath it, et cetera. What's your evaluation of what our average degradation of those road conditions has been over the last 6 or 7 years?
Yeah, we do conduct updated PCIs every year for probably about half of the town each year. I can say our PCI has gone up by about 2 points, even with the degradation that you're talking about. We are doing a lot of roads every single year, about 3 miles plus is what we end up coming up with. So we are making considerable improvements. So those roads that used to be 50 are now up to 100, and they definitely have a big impact on the PCI.
And what about the roads that used to be, that were in 2015, 60 or 65, such that they're just sort of hitting the schedule today?
Yeah, they have come down. Absolutely.
Just because I drive them a lot, I've noticed, and I'm surprised, although I shouldn't be, to see that Codfish Falls, for example, was not part of the 5-year plan and has become, this winter was very, very harsh on it. And so I guess without getting into specifics about roads, Wormwood Hill is another one that, I'm not sure people drive any faster on paved roads, and I think our traffic studies don't necessarily show that they do, but the thing that I've noticed makes driving easier, at least at any speed, is the fact that they're smooth. Not the surface, but the actual road itself. They're devoid of big frost heaves, the way that our roads that haven't been paved recently are. What would your sort of maximum capacity be to very dramatically accelerate the pavement? We're at the point now today, from an annual budget perspective, that you asked for 6 years ago. I think that study, I'm remembering 6 years, but it called for $1 million a year, or maybe 1.3 in road paving, and we were at 600,000 or 700,000, and we've slowly increased. Now we're there, but what would your sort of maximum capacity be as a department to get things done dramatically faster?
Yeah, with the current crew, we're pretty much where we're at. So that's with the current crews of 6 people. So I did request more personnel in this budget to try to get another crew. that would be 3 more positions. I think the budget will only reflect 2, knowing we can't get there that quick. That's where we make a decision. Do we want to fix all the drainage, or do we want to go to overlays and take that risk? We could do more if we did the overlay and don't do the full rebuild. But those are, you want to overlay a road that's relatively good, doesn't have all those humps that you're talking about. And
I'm struggling to think of a road that hasn't been paved recently that is a collector road, at least, that would be a good candidate for an overlay. And I think my opinion is, given your annual sort of update on what drainage issues you've discovered as you've gone to pave roads, even places where you didn't think there are going to be drainage issues, and there are significant ones, I wouldn't advocate for that. So
we
I
would
just
still
wanna-
replace, excuse me, we
go
would
ahead.
still replace the drainage that's there. We just won't put any new drainage in. So
Got it.
we would replace the catch basin, do the cross drainage and overlay. So we'd have to raise the catch basins up to make sure it matches that new 2 inches.
I guess my question is, so you're limited partially by the number of staff that you have, the crews that you have to do the
Yes.
drainage work, which is primarily, you're contracting for actual paving. At this point, your crews are working directly on
Yeah,
drainage, is that
all
correct?
the town crews do is the drainage, everything else, the full depth reclamation, that's the contractor, and the paving is a contractor.
And so do we have any options under our collective bargaining agreements to accelerate that without dramatically increasing our staffing? Or is it a one goes, if we wanted to say, here's $3 million, let's pave double, let's do this in 2.5 years, that would involve hiring 2 new crews? It wouldn't be a thing of, we could keep our existing crews in contract for the other work?
So for me, because I run the operation, my biggest concern is getting the drainage out there and doing the work. What I've noticed this year is that we're having more failures outside, like you said, Codfish Falls, Gurleyville, so on and so forth. I have to concentrate a drainage crew on that versus going onto a road that we are ready to pave. So really, when we look at the full depth of what we want to do, the drainage is our biggest hindrance. Yes, I'm sorry.
Go ahead and finish what you were saying.
So I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've been in all situations where we've hired contractors, or we did it in-house. In West Hartford, we did it in-house. In other areas, we hired contractors. And what happens is, when the contractor comes in, if we don't have sufficient oversight of what that contractor is doing, and I won't go into specifics, we will have issues that we've dealt with the last 5 years in other areas that contractors have worked. And that's my biggest concern.
I just had.
No, you actually mentioned a lot of the roads that, we're seeing these pipe failures on that require a lot of new drainage. Wormwood Hill, a lot of those have corrugated metal piping. So those, we couldn't really, in good conscience, say we should just overlay those. If you wanted to make a lot of impact quickly, you could try to concentrate on the neighborhood roads, but you're really not addressing a lot of people that way. You are addressing that immediate area, but again, that's a pretty limited bang for the dollar.
And our just final question, are you seeing, we had a significant flood event on the Mount Hope River last year, a historic flood event on the Mount Hope River. There were several other water events where water was higher than I've seen it in the 25 years I've lived here, even though water always gets high sometimes. I'm thinking of the Fenton River after some of our hurricane events last year. These are all sort of climate change affected things. Is this something that we should be expecting and then the sort of cause of that, or an effect of that flooding, is we have more culvert and drainage failures as they're overrun with water, and road failures as roads are overcome with water, et cetera. Is this something that we need to think about, or are you already thinking about it as you're paving, and how?
We're always thinking about it. We're designing it, for the the new flood guidance, so the new 100-year flood or 50-year flood. And, so Derek designs each road we're paving, Derek designs the drainage and takes that into consideration. So we are seeing changes. Even this winter, some people would say it was a mild winter, but we had cold, hot, and that caused a lot of those frost heaves. It wasn't a traditional winter where it's cold and then it starts to warm up. And like even today, it's 18 degrees today when it's not 18 degrees at the end of March. So we're definitely planning for that. And at your question, I think I didn't answer it also, was collective bargaining agreement currently says that no work can be contracted out to avoid overtime. So the union could say, this is work we can do. If you contracted out the drainage work, we can do this work. You have to offer it to us as overtime first. I don't know if they would want to work a 16-hour day, but I don't know if they could work a 16-hour day with light and all that. But that is something we have to consider.
Thanks.
Ms. Berthelot, followed by Mr. Katchenberger.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have a 16-year-old, and she loves driving on Mansfield City Road, nice and smooth and wide. She says, why is the best road in town? The road I have to drive the slowest on as we go by the middle school. I recognize people like to drive on smooth roads. I am, however, on the opposite side of the fence, as I've always been on this issue with Mr. Shaken. I don't want to accelerate fixing the roads until there comes a point where we have a better sense of how to keep pedestrians safe. Every day I open up the newspaper, there's another person who's been killed on the roads. We had a person killed here in Mansfield on our wide, smooth road. And we can argue about whether people drive faster on bumpy roads or smooth roads, but for sure people are driving faster. And they're driving bigger vehicles, which are causing more people to die, whether as pedestrians or on bicycles or just getting hit by another car. So I really want to slow things down until we can have a educated debate, but also bring in thoughtful ideas on how to slow down traffic so that we're not just building a speedway for people to drive really fast. So I'm really, for me, I'm again on the opposite side, and I know that reasonable minds can differ and that there are people in town who differ with me on this, but right now I'd rather deal with potholes, and which definitely slow me down. My road has probably got more than most, and then have another person die in town. I'm more concerned about safety. Thank you.
Mr. Katchenberger?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation and all the work involved. So this one issue, I think, of course, everyone's concerned about roads, and we've heard, I think, more about the poor condition in the last year than we have in many years, a couple of years combined at least. One thing, we can't promise that we're going to pave every road, obviously, or you can't promise in the next 2 years. But the uncertainty and the lack of knowledge of when is our road, for example, up for repavement, and what can we do about it if we see something that's worse. And I think it may be online, but I haven't been able to find it yet. I think it would be very useful, whether it's to have the 5-year paving plan or make it very accessible, and maybe not even on the Public Works webpage, but accessible through the homepage of what's the current paving plan. And yes, understanding that that's going to change, conditions can, like a emergency drainage issue, and that's understandable and can also be put there. But I think it would be very useful if people have a sense of knowing, okay, when is our road on the list? Understanding, again, the caveats. Because not knowing makes it think, well, no one's ever looked at the road. When was the last time they came by? But at least, well, it may not be good information if, like Storrs Heights, where I live, is not on this map. That's not good information if you live on Storrs Heights, but at least it's information. And so if this could be made as available as possible online, I think then it would be helpful.
We can do that, and I also want to remind, and some people may not have been on the council time, the study, if a road gets below 50, you got to rebuild it anyway, so whether it's at 50 or a 0, it doesn't really matter. You're going to spend the same amount of money fixing it. What you'd want to do is fix the roads that are in that 60, 70 range, they don't turn into a full depth.
Right.
But the problem is, when they did this study, they didn't see the depth of asphalt. And I know the first road I wanted to do, mill and pave, I think was Candide Lane. We'll be in and out here quick. Well, turned out there wasn't much asphalt there, so we had to do a full depth reclamation. So if you have a bad road, it can stay bad for 10 years. It's still going to be a bad road. I know people don't want to hear that, but we're trying to prevent a road that's in the middle from getting bad. The good news, I guess, for those people with a real bad road is there isn't too many roads stuck in the middle. So right now we're trying to deal with collector roads first, then neighborhood roads. That's why we want to try the chip seal on some neighborhood roads like Charles and Lorraine. You know, they've been around for 30, 40 years. Their pavement's in pretty good condition, just some little drainage work and we get in and out of there. We will put it up on the website.
And this PowerPoint could also be,
Yeah.
part of it
Yeah,
again. But,
when people call, I'm honest with them and say, no, I'm not going to get to you in 5 years. I know you don't want to hear that, but right now you're not on the 5-year plan. And
that's good for people to know that.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Mr. Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a few questions. Going back to the corrugated steel drainage and the asphalt coating and how that is eroding away by the sand, how is that sand getting in there? Isn't the catch basin supposed to retain the sand?
Absolutely, that's what a catch basin's supposed to do. But if you don't clean your catch basin annually, it just builds up and it just allows it to go down. So my experience is, and what I've seen before I got here, or as soon as I got here, they weren't cleaned on a yearly basis. So if you take 30 years of sand going down a pipe because you didn't clean your basins, and or you had an open culvert, then you can't stop the sand from doing that.
In the slide there, I saw a great deal of sand in one of the culverts. How did that get there? Is that from not cleaning the basin?
So
you'd like to go
are
back
you
to that?
talking Codfish Falls?
Whatever one, yeah, that one there.
So that's Hillendale, and that was 2 streams. We are not allowed to go into the stream. And
Yeah, so this picture isn't actually in the stream bed at all. They had just pulled this out and it was sitting on top of the road, so I just wanted a nice photo of what the actual pipe looked like. So that sand isn't in the stream bed. That's actually on the road.
Okay, I'm concerned that, the silt and sand may be going into our drainage systems. That wouldn't be a good thing. How are we doing on drain cleaning, basin cleaning right now? Are we caught up on all that?
absolutely.
Okay.
We do it on a yearly basis
Okay,
with a contractor, because again, there's some things that make sense to contract out, and then there's some things that don't make sense. Contracting the basins, the pumped out, makes sense. It's a relatively inexpensive cost. But I will go back to Codfish Falls. You have open ends on both sides, and as the inlet, the gravel and the sand comes down the banks and goes through the pipe, you can't stop that. There's nothing there to collect the sand. It's just an open pipe.
okay, understood. Back to Councilor Shakin's question on contracting out drainage. Are there any estimates out there on contracted drainage work and how it might compare to in-house work?
Yep. We looked at a recent bid that was approximately $5,200 per catch basin contracted out. We're currently doing it for, I think it was between $3,200 and $3,800.
Have you had more than one contractor bid?
That was a publicly bid project.
Okay. As far as union constraints on subcontracting work, I would like to enlist the town manager to provide that provision in the contract, so I can better understand that.
I think Mr. Carrington understands it pretty well. Mr. Carrington, would you like to explain it?
I think the counselor was asking for a copy of it, so I'll
Yeah.
just, we can send him a
We'll,
copy of the
we'll
contract.
circulate that provision to the entire council.
Okay, thank you. One last comment on the storm drain out here in the parking lot. Of course, I followed that drain for about a week's time. It started out with, thank you, Town of Mansfield cones. And it looked like, it rained a little bit that week, but it looked like a great deal of water went into that storm drain with a very little amount of rain. The following week, I came back and I looked at it, and it was fire department cones there. I am curious why the fire department cones replaced the Town of Mansfield cones. And I'm curious if the fire department might be discharging water in that drain.
Just so you know, we share cones, and sometimes they get mixed up. So what you may have thought should have been town cones, sometimes we use them both. And I'll assure you that catch basin, we knew about it on Saturday. We did a one call on Monday. It takes 3 days to do the one call. I had scheduled it to be repaired immediately once the one call was ready. Unfortunately, we had bad weather, and we couldn't do it, and we did it the following Monday. I did, and I do take it personal that when somebody says that something's unsafe or dangerous, I take it personal. That in no way was that area going to collapse completely, because I knew what was going on. So to answer your question, we share cones. And I don't think the fire department releases water in there.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question. Could you bring us up to date on Maple Road?
So, the Region Council of Governments received about $44 million in requests for $38 million in funding. So we're currently awaiting their prioritization. This is regards the second phase. So as you recall, we submitted 2 LOTSIP grants, which are submitted to the CROG. The first one was funded and selected, so that's currently going through the DOT process, basically to release those funds and allow the town to begin its work. We have a bid out for survey of that entire section, and we're going to try to do the second phase as well at the same time. So that's kind of where we're at this point in time, is basically waiting for DOT to authorize the town to continue the work on phase 1, and also for the CROG to either give us a blessing that we receive phase 2, or if we may have to go through another round of solicitations.
And just a reminder, the slide before when I said, sometimes getting other people's funding makes you wait. So Maple Road is funded the first half, but when that's going to happen is probably still 2 years out, just based on the way things run.
All right, thank you. Jacob.
I have like a follow-up question. So I know budget season is coming up and now, and so we're going to hear some details about the next fiscal year projects soon when we talk about your capital budget. I'm just wondering if I can do like a pre-budget season flag, understanding that the manager's budget may not include the full breadth of this request, but it might be helpful for me and for others on the council to get a sense of what it would take from an annual budget perspective to, within a relatively short period of time, get us to the place that we were trying to get to back in 2015 when this pavement study came out, which is that we would address enough of the roads in medium condition regularly such that we would be sort of regularly repaving those roads. We would address the bad roads as we go, and then we would sort of get into this holding pattern where we'd have to do obviously annual maintenance and paving, but that we essentially wouldn't need to all at once tear the entire road system in the town up and repave it. And we're kind of at that point, I think, in a number, like you said, we've we've handled all those middling roads. Now we've got the bulk of roads that are at the below 50 condition, in poor condition, and so it's a question of how much would it take, thought exercise, a budgeting exercise, how much would it take for us to sort of rapidly or within a period of a few years get us to that place of ideal sort of maintenance schedule like we had talked about back in 2015. I think it would just be helpful for all of us to understand what we would be talking about. We think about other infrastructure needs. You mentioned Maple Road, and I was just thinking about how highly utilized the sidewalk on 89 is and how helpful things like that would be in other parts of town, and those are expensive. And we're focusing almost all of our budget right now on making sure that we have passable by automobile roads. So I think it would just be helpful for me to understand what kind of investment that might take. And
let's get an answer.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
No, wait, we'll come up with something.
That's going to require some research.
But we can definitely come up with a number, and that's where the Cape Seal, looking at using some of that to take care of some of the neighborhood roads, so it keeps, because the good news is everybody likes the roads. Most people like the roads that we're paving, so they want it for them, and I can understand it and appreciate that, and we want to do that, but of course comes down to funding and personnel, so we can definitely answer that question when I come before you in a couple weeks.
Mr. Bruder.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just to build off that, I don't know if the proposal or the research could include what one additional crew would look like versus 2 additional crews for timing.
Okay, any further questions? All right, well, thank you very much, all three of you, for your time and
Thank you.
your thoughtful contributions and your patience. And we look forward to seeing your budget proposals. All right, next item on our agenda is the Mansfield Apartments redevelopment scoping process. Mr. Aylesworth, would you like to introduce Ms. Painter?
Certainly. So as the council's aware, the University of Connecticut has proposed a pretty substantial redevelopment of the Mansfield Apartments site, adding, I believe, is it about 700 units or thereabouts, going from 200 some to about 900 thereabout?
I've seen different numbers. The most recent one was 40 beds existing.
And so because this is a very significant project with significant implications on a wide range of fronts for use and development and enjoyment of the downtown, it's certainly a project that the town of Mansfield takes an active interest in. And so Ms. Painter can walk us through what the Planning and Zoning Commission has already done as part of the scoping process on this front.
Good evening, everyone. As Ryan mentioned, the University of Connecticut is proposing to redevelop Mansfield Apartments. In general terms, they're looking at going to about 900 beds from currently around 240 beds, 450 parking spaces, and we estimate, we believe there's about 130 parking spaces today. So essentially, they're more than tripling the size of the development. While trying to stay within the current disturbed area based on the information we've seen. They're proposing between 2 and 4 buildings, which would be 5 to 7 stories in height, as well as a parking garage to help accommodate all of those vehicles. So the Planning and Zoning Commission did review the materials that we had through the scoping process, and I will say the materials that we have at this time are very preliminary. And kind of I've given you the highlights at this point about what may happen on this project. We do not have a concept plan. We just have the presentation that the university did as part of the scoping meeting. Additionally, the Conservation Commission, Traffic Authority, and the Parks and Natural Resources Committee also reviewed the materials and provide comments to the Planning and Zoning Commission and to the council to consider. Because of the time frame for the scoping process, it's generally about a 30-day process, about 4 weeks. And the scoping meeting itself happens midway through. And so from the time of the scoping meeting to the deadline for comments, it was literally a 2-week time frame, which is very difficult for us to get before both the commission and the council, and for our advisory committees to be able to provide meaningful comments. So in this particular case, the Planning and Zoning Commission did submit comments individually, and they did take and submit copies of all the comments received from the Traffic Authority, Conservation Commission, and Parks and Natural Resources Committee. The general, it is a long letter. I will say it goes into extensive detail about the concerns that they have. And the primary focus was really identifying the need for a full environmental impact evaluation. As part of this process, the university has to make a decision at the end of the scoping process. Either an environmental impact evaluation is needed based on the state regulations in terms of when such a review is required, or that an environmental impact evaluation is not needed. So what you'll see in the letter is essentially going through all of the concerns that were identified by the commission, staff, and the advisory committees, tying them back to a specific regulation in terms of an element that needs to be considered. And they are required to consider direct, indirect, and cumulative impacts. And one of the criteria in terms of determining if a full evaluation is needed is whether or not during the scoping process you can identify it's possible to identify the full impacts of the proposed project. The conclusion of the Planning and Zoning Commission was there was not enough information to determine the full impacts of the project on the physical environment, the natural environment, as well as socioeconomically. So they basically are recommending that a full environmental impact evaluation be conducted. They did identify several areas of concern, I would say predominantly traffic, parking, as well as impact on Moss Sanctuary and visual impacts of 5 to 7 story buildings in an area where the town has previously identified a desire to see lower scale buildings that are this is the southern gateway to downtown. So as you're going into downtown, kind of increasing in scale as opposed to having a large scale project right on this southern edge, but abutting the sanctuary. So what you have in your packet is the actual full letter that the Planning and Zoning Commission submitted last week prior to the comment deadline to make sure that we had some comments on the record. I will note that the University of Connecticut staff did agree to take comments after the deadline, but we wanted to make sure that we did meet the official published deadline. So any action you take this evening, we will forward that on to them. They are aware of the timing issue that we were experiencing with the scoping process.
Thank you. Before we continue, I noticed that the live stream seems to have stopped.
They are actively working on a solution.
Should we take a break while they...
The audio is fine. They just don't have the benefit of the video at the moment.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. All right, so we can continue then. Questions for Ms. Painter? Mr. Shuren.
I assume that as with other housing projects that have been discussed the last couple of years, the presumption is that students housed in this facility would be unlikely or would not be renting other facilities in town. That's basically kind of an assumption?
Well, it's essentially on-campus housing. So it's the university proposing apartment-style living on campus. So my understanding is they're looking at apartments that would accommodate 4 residents per unit with living, kitchen, and I think they're trying to come up with housing that is competing with the new off-campus development that we're seeing and try and create more attractive housing. It is geared towards upperclassmen, so juniors and seniors.
Just an environmental impact analysis looks at the proposed facility. A lowercase environmental impact analysis, lowercase e, might consider the impact generally of having fewer students renting houses across town. But that would not be encompassed in such an analysis here, I presume.
In all likelihood, no. So they are required, if they do have to do an environmental impact evaluation, one of the things that they need to do is evaluate alternatives. So that first you have the no-build alternative. We just leave Mansfield Apartments the way it is and we do nothing. The second, typically the what they're proposing to do is one of their alternatives. One of the things that the Planning and Zoning Commission in their comments asked them to do was to consider whether or not you do housing, but you don't do 900 beds. So as you look at the impacts, if the traffic impacts the parking, pedestrian safety, maybe one of your alternatives is not to say we're not going to do anything or we're not going to do housing, or it's to look at literally what is the scope of your project.
Mr. Shaken, followed by Ms. Berthelot.
Thanks. Sort of to similar line of questioning to Ron's. Do you know if UConn's overarching housing plan would, if this were built, net out to the same number of beds for students, as in, are they planning to decommission other housing for this, or would they be truly adding capacity? I ask because it's been difficult to ascertain over the years. UConn has at times told us they've got an overabundance of capacity, that they're not full, and then also that they are full. And it's interesting to hear that, 900 is a significant, at least 10%, if not 15% higher than their existing bedded capacity on campus. So I'm just curious if you have any sense of that.
We have not yet seen the housing plan. So we have heard of it. We have not yet seen it, so I can't tell you what is in it. I do know this is the second project that they are working to greenlight. The first is they brought back the South Campus development that they had canceled a few years ago.
We just entered an infinity loop for a second on the video. That's interesting. I was part of a meeting with President Aguinomi more than a year ago.
Recording in progress.
Where he promised that we would see a copy of that housing plan, so it would be nice to see it. I can see some potential benefit to there being redevelopment at Mansfield Apartments. I'm a little shocked about 2 5-story buildings and a parking garage, but I could see economic benefit to the downtown, to increase the population near here. I could see potential economic benefit to the community center, to have a gym right across the street, pool, et cetera. But I agree with all of the concerns and from the capital E environment that this letter raises. And I'm also very curious whether they are planning on decommissioning some of the more unattractive housing options, and at what price this housing will be offered. If it's geared towards upperclassmen, and freshmen and sophomores are still living in buildings that were built in 1945, then I'm not sure it's going to have a huge impact on our town's attractiveness for off-campus renters. So I will say that I would have preferred a hockey rink here rather than perhaps this development. I think it would have done more wonders economically for the town. And so I'm a little also conscious of a friend from Ashford calls Mansfield the land of no. And so I want to be conscious that we aren't closing ourselves off to any proposal just because it's a proposal that's different than what exists today, which is apartments that were built at the end of World War II that when I was in college 12 years ago were completely falling apart and were horrible places to live for the students who were living in them then. And so I would just hope that we can approach this with an open mind while getting our environmental concerns answered through an EIE.
Ms. Berthelot, followed by Mr. Katzenberger.
Thank you, Mayor. I feel like I'm a step behind here because I don't really understand the legal requirements here, like what scoping really is, and what our role is here. I'm hoping you'll fill me in.
I'm going to do the best I can, recognizing that this is a process that applies only to state agencies and not to municipalities. But through the Connecticut Environmental Policy Act, when a state agency is contemplating certain actions, in this case, a significant development, they are required to go through kind of a multi-step public process. And the first one is what they call scoping, where they release a notice saying this is what we're proposing to do, and they take public comment on concerns. It can be support, it can be concern. So similar to a public hearing that the council might have or the Planning and Zoning Commission might have. And in this case, it's really to identify, is this project something that is significant enough to warrant a full analysis of looking at all the potential impacts and what mitigation may be needed for that project? Or is it something that, you know, the impacts are can be completely identified at the time, given the information that is presented, and they understand it's not going to have a significant impact, either direct or indirect, and that they can move forward without going through that full evaluation. So the full evaluation looks at a variety of factors, both from the natural environment, so wetlands, water courses, air quality, and I'm not going to be able to list all of them. I want to say there's probably over 20 criteria that they have to look at that are separated into 3 buckets. And in this particular case, I think the impression that both Jennifer and Kaufman and I had listening to the scoping presentation was that there was a really strong emphasis on, well, this is a redevelopment. We're just replacing housing with housing. We're going to use the existing disturbed area. And both of us came into work the next day, having listened to it at home and had a conversation. Both said, they really seem to be pushing the redevelopment aspect here, and we're wondering if they're trying to go towards what they call the off-ramp, which is we don't have to do the full EIE. If no EIE, if they determine no EIE is required, then they just move on into design, the project is designed and built, and the public process stops. If an EIE is required, then they will go through, they will produce that evaluation looking at every single factor that they are required to under the statute and the regulations, and they will identify whether mitigation is needed. So for example, traffic or parking, do we need to do anything to mitigate the impacts that this development is going to have? That ultimately goes to the Office of Policy and Management, where they issue a record of decision. So if you remember, for example, for our sewer project, because that was funded partially with a grant from the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, we went through that scoping process, the EIE, and then ultimately the Office of Policy and Management had to say, yes, you have addressed all of the impacts. So there is a public hearing. If they go to the environmental impact evaluation, there is a public hearing and another public comment period. Typically, the town has issued comments under joint signature from the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Town Council to try and say we're going to submit one set of comments. We take into account the comments we receive from various advisory committees that may have relevant information. Ultimately, what the university has to do is address those comments. So for example, in scoping, as part of their final report, they will have to address the comments that we've provided in some shape or form. Does not mean they're going to make any changes based on them, but they do have to at least acknowledge them and say, you know, we don't think this is a significant impact for this reason. And I will say in the last few years, you know, I've actually gotten phone calls from the university after we've issued EIE comments saying, can we talk about the comment on lighting? You know, this is something we just really can't do. Here's why. And that's something that I was impressed with, because in the past, you know, we write the letters, they go into the report, the university issues a written response, and that's it. And so I think there's definitely been more dialogue over the last few years as we issue comments to try and understand how they can address those concerns.
Thank you, Linda. That's real helpful.
Mr. Katzenberger, followed by Mr. Osberger.
Thanks, and thank you, Linda. I think through the various questions you've answered most of what I was going to ask, but just to confirm, so there's a couple options for this. Is it replacing, as Ben said, asked, is it replacing existing dorms? Are they increasing the percentage on campus, or do they anticipate a fairly significant, somewhat significant student population increase? of residential students, which not, I don't think is necessarily bad news at all, but depends where they live. And we don't, do we know that?
Yeah. That's, so the information presented as part of the scoping was really, and looks like Ryan may have an answer.
Well, I was just going to say, so for what it's worth, in previous meetings we've had with UConn officials, they have said that they don't at this time envision growing the size of the student population. What they're not saying is what percentage of the student population they're trying to have on campus versus off. So they've basically gone as far as saying they're not trying to grow student enrollment per se. But they, to comments Linda's already made, they have not shared the housing study to give us a fuller sense of what their long-range plan is for total number of beds on campus.
I think they have acknowledged that their current housing stock is not meeting the desires and what students are looking for in terms of housing. And so I do think this project is an attempt to modernize on-campus housing stock and an attempt to retain students, again, being geared towards upperclassmen, juniors and seniors. That's a lot of times when students are moving off campus. So if they can provide them with an on-campus alternative that's appealing, then maybe they can retain them and not have them move off.
I will add that at the next UConn Board of Trustees meeting, one of the items is significant funding for renovating some of these old dorms. So they are, and President Aguinobi also told us that they would be working on improving the old dorms as well. So nobody has said to us they're going to close or tear down old dorms, but they have said they are going to make them more attractive. I would also add that I am a little nervous that they decided to do this in order to create disincentive for private developers on Mansfield property. Mr. Kotzenberger, I cut you off.
That's okay. And that actually was one of the things I was going to ask, because they have, I mean, certainly it's very easy to identify dorms, especially if you've lived here for for a while, that have been here forever. My parents lived in Mansfield Apartments in 1950. They moved there, and the outside, at least, doesn't look a whole lot different than home movies. But more to the question, I mean, because there are, with the dormitories that are more within the core campus, the what used to be called the grad center and stuff, I mean, that is also available to be, I mean, in some sense, it's much more preferable for the town, I think, at least in this project, to rebuild in those areas rather than triple the size of an existing complex. Now, we don't presumably get to make that, we don't get to make that decision. But is that also on, to the extent, do you know what those proposals are?
As I said, I know they're moving forward. So several years ago, they had they had done an environmental impact evaluation for South Campus, and that was the area where the Brown houses, so Mirror Lake next to, I want to say, Arjona.
Yeah.
And so they had proposed an honors dormitory there. And at some point, they pulled that project. And I think the council and the Planning and Zoning Commission actually wrote a letter saying, we really wish you'd put that back. That was additional quality housing that you were going to build on campus. But they pulled that project. That project, I don't know if it's still designated for honor students, but I do know they are pushing forward with a new South Campus residence hall. So I think you're starting to see more focus on housing from the university on campus properties. And I think that your comments in terms of location are something that were echoed by some of the discussions I heard from the Conservation Commission and other commissions that said, wow, this density of housing might be more appropriate closer into the core of campus than in the location where they're proposing it. But I think to your point, we can comment on impacts. We don't have any jurisdiction. Our role is really to comment as part of the hearing process on the impacts that we are concerned with and how those impacts are mitigated.
I just had one quick follow-up. The traffic study seems really important here. Is that considered part of the EIA?
That would be, yes. So they as part of and that's one of the reasons that it's pushing for an environmental impact evaluation is the traffic study. As I said, they're going to over triple the number of parking spaces there. At the same time, multiple committees, the Traffic Authority, and I believe also Parks and Natural Resources, identified a concern that if you were catering to upperclassmen, juniors, and seniors, and you have 900 beds and 450 parking spaces, that would seem to be a little underparked. And where are those students going to park? And it's one of those concern of impacts on, parking at this facility, parking at inappropriate locations around the sanctuary, on neighborhood streets. And there's also a pedestrian safety concern. And I think those are things that we had already identified as part of the community challenge grant that we submitted. But one of the things we do know is that when Mansfield Apartments was fully occupied before it became isolation housing during the pandemic, is that while we have a sidewalk that will take you to the intersection of 195 and 275, where you can then cross with a pedestrian light and a crosswalk, many students that lived in that complex, and I think this is anecdotal from anyone who works in the town hall complex, simply walked across mid-block to the town hall complex and cut through by the tennis courts, E.O. Smith. And so if we are now taking that population from 230 or 240 beds and going to 900, that becomes an even bigger concern of mid-block crossings and so some of the comments you'll see are that we need to start thinking of how you physically redesign 275 to put physical barriers in to discourage those mid-block crossings and really encourage them to go to the crosswalks that exist on 195.
Mr. Osberger.
Yes, Linda. Part of this is from the earlier discussion and what Mr. Shaken had said about wishing to have the hockey arena there. The concern back then, and as I'm sure you know, and thankfully you are doing the EIE, is that with the increased surface area of a roof like a hockey arena, but now in this case, we're going to have the surface area of a parking garage and then all those other roofs as the water runoff into the Moss Sanctuary, and I'm really, really concerned about that. Plus of all the paving for the parking and just overall, instead of it being able to soak into the ground as it can now, of course, all that open surface area is going to create much more water runoff.
And again, those are other comments that were made was, how is the stormwater going to be handled? I mean, on the plus side, this is a disturbed site, and from what we were able to tell from the scoping presentation, they are looking to hopefully contain their development to the already disturbed area and not encroach further. But some of the comments that were provided by the Conservation Commission was a concern regarding actually getting wetlands delineated. So right there, we don't have any wetlands mapping right now, other than the high-level soil mapping that is done on a statewide basis. They are also concerned that there may be seeps and springs that are headwaters that need to be protected. So water quality was a large issue here as well.
Yeah, it's a very large concern. I'm glad that there was going to be an EIE done, and I think in the beginning there was kind of
I
iffy.
think that what these letters do is they ask for an EIE
Correct.
because UConn would just as soon avoid one.
Sure.
So there's no commitment. At the end of the scoping process, the determination will be made. What the commission tried to do in this letter was to specifically tie concerns back to the SEPA regulations to say, here are our concerns and why we think you have not fully, we can't fully understand the impacts of what you're doing, and therefore you need to do an environmental impact assessment for this.
Mr. Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think my colleagues here have asked all the questions. I just have a comment. The amount of work that must have gone into that letter must have been extensive. It's not your average letter. You've got it very well covered. And I think you've answered or asked and notified all the concerns that we should. Thank you.
Well, there is, on, let's see, page 67. The motion is on page 68. Mr. Bruder?
Thank you, Mayor. Because of how well I think that the first letter did, I'm going to make the motion to move effective March 28th, 2022, to authorize the mayor to submit a letter to the University of Connecticut on behalf of the town council in support of the Planning Zoning Commission's comments dated March 22nd, 2022, related to the redevelopment of Mansfield Apartments.
Is there a second? Mr. Coleman seconds. Mr. Bruder, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Just briefly, Mayor, to say that I think that the Planning and Zoning Commission, in help with Ms. Painter's assistance, has done a really good job in terms of addressing what my concerns are and what I think that our residents' concerns are. So thank you. I ask everyone to support this.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to comment? Mr. Coleman?
Yeah, judging by the University of Connecticut's past performance, the University of Connecticut generally gets what they want, so I'm not holding my breath that we'll have any changes to their plan.
Are we ready to vote? Does anybody wish to abstain? Does anybody wish to vote in the negative? Pardon? All right, all those in favor, please raise your hands. Unanimous. Thank you. And one thing I forgot to do in my comments is to announce that I had testified on behalf of this is sort of linked because it's a UConn thing. Representative Haddad and Senator Flexer introduced a bill requiring the university to go through the full process of state approvals for purchasing land or property that any other state agency has to do, but which they had been exempted from. And there was a public hearing at which I testified on Friday. So we'll see what happens. I'm hoping that that the university understands that we're not establishing a hostile relationship, but that these concerns are in fact serious for the town, and that we will continue, as they do, to advocate for the interests of our citizens and our community. So, with that, the next item is reports of council committees. Finance?
We have not met since the last council meeting.
Personnel?
We've not met.
We-
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
We met earlier this evening, and we worked a bit further on the proposed recommended charge sent to the council, the Personnel Committee. We will be presenting that shortly. We talked about the status of the Personnel Appeals Board. Those of you on the council for a while will remember that this board has been established but has not met, and we're getting further information on its exact status, perhaps looking to somewhat revisions in the status of that Personnel Appeals Board, which deals with appeals for non-union members of the town staff. There are 24 such. We also proposed, and we have a motion, for the hiring of a position, the Community Services Coordinator. Perhaps Mr. Ellsworth can talk about that briefly.
Yeah, so as part of the annual budget development process, one of the things I ask, or the town manager asks department heads to do, in addition to preparing sort of their traditional operating budgets and overtime requests and capital improvement plans, is what's called service improvements. So this is where if somebody was asking for more personnel to take on new tasks, address areas of the mission that they feel they're under capacity, that's where they would do that. And so Ms. Painter, who you just heard from, one of her service improvements for this year was the creation of a new full-time position, Community Services Coordinator, that would have a number of different responsibilities, but in a nutshell, this person would be the lead on administering a wide range of these assistance-oriented programs like Helping Hands and others that come down the the pipeline that right now is being handled by basically all the staff kind of taking a turn and working with people and trying to see it through to completion. So there's not really a dedicated person, and as, you know, I appreciate the comment Councilor Coleman just made about, you know, taking a look at, you know, what Linda Shop just did in this letter and the level of research that goes into that. You can see that there's a lot that her shop does, and so she's proposed creating this this new position, which I support. You'll hear about it in my budget recommendations that come forward. However, with a particular focus on the Helping Hands program, which those funds, as the council knows, have to be fully expended by the end of December, time is precious. We don't want to turn back funds that we could have otherwise gotten out the door. And so whereas under normal circumstances, we would propose to create this position as of July 1, the start of the new fiscal year, the case is being made here that actually makes good sense to hire earlier, start this person a couple months earlier to help administer the programs sooner. And so that's what's being proposed.
Mr. Sherrin, go
Yeah,
ahead.
the Personnel Committee has a recommendation adopted with one dissenting vote. Move effective March 28th, 2022 to endorse hiring a full-time community services coordinator in the Planning and Development Department starting on May 1st, 2022, 2 months in advance.
And it's a committee recommendation, so it doesn't need a second. What?
I don't know if it's a point of order. This item's not on our agenda, and there's no supporting document materials. I know they're part of perhaps the Personnel Committee's packet, but it seems like something that would have a fiscal impact like this, that we would perhaps, I'm assuming we won't need to make an appropriation given the time in the fiscal year, but I'd want to know that. So I'm just wondering if it's proper to be made tonight without inclusion on our agenda, or if we ought to handle it in other ways.
Mr. Bruder?
And just, I know for the Committee on Committees, we would have our meeting on Thursday, and we wouldn't be able to get the people on the agenda in time for Monday's meeting. And we would always wait to the next meeting, just for FOI.
Right. So what I will recommend is that we have a motion from the Personnel Committee, but we don't have any of the backup documents in front of us. So I would suggest that it be added to the next council meeting agenda, at which point we will vote on it.
I have no objection to withdrawing my motion. Withdrawing the Personnel Committee motion. We have the motion.
We have the motion, but I'm suggesting that we table the motion
Okay, yeah.
until our next meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
For parliamentary reasons.
I know, I knew it was gonna happen. So it needs
We
to be
can
a
either
vote.
vote to table a motion, there is a motion to table it, or the mover of the motion can withdraw that motion and make it sometime later.
All right, we'll just do it. Mr. Sherrin has withdrawn his motion. We will do this at our next council meeting. Order of 10, it's sort of hard to deal with this. Committee on Committees.
We have not met since our last meeting.
Okay. Departmental and Advisory Committee reports. And petitions, requests, and communications, Mr. Shakin.
I don't have anything on the petitions, requests, and communications that are included in our packet. However, I have two requests, I have one request. The council has been in receipt of a number of email communications from Mr. Coleman, and we are prohibited from discussing council business by email because of the Freedom of Information Act. And in general, the way that we've handled that is there's a request not always followed by the council to each other that we communicate with the town manager, and the town manager can then communicate with us via email. When there is, however, communication that happens through the @town council email address that we all get, from a counselor, I would just request that it go into the packet under petitions, requests, and communications so that the public can see what we see. I think if we don't do that, we risk running afoul of the Freedom of Information Act when it's a counselor talking to other counselors about council business, as Mr. Coleman's emails were to us.
We have generally said in accordance with the FOI law, the only kinds of communication that we can have among us are scheduling or adding an agenda item. So anything else constitutes deliberation and therefore is subject to scrutiny, which is one of the reasons that I strongly recommend that if you get this kind of a communication from another council member, you simply do not respond, because that constitutes deliberation and that makes it a violation. So I think Mr. Shaken's recommendation that that the communication go to the town manager all right, here's the second piece to this is that several years ago, the Democrats made a request of the town manager for some backup budget documentation in order to finalize our proposed revisions to the town budget. And Mr. Kegler, who was one of the Republicans, objected very strongly, saying if the town manager sends out information, it should go to everybody. Not for deliberation, but just to make sure that everybody has the same information. So I think Mr. Shaken's request that the question go to Mr. Aylesworth, who will then distribute his answer to everybody, is the proper way to handle this. I know at one point Mr. Coleman said he wanted to see that in writing. I think you could probably go back to our minutes of the town council during the time when Mr. Kegler, look at budget season, and when Mr. Kegler was on the board, and you would find that resolution or that decision. But it certainly has been policy and practice of the council ever since.
Can I just put a finer point on my request? I agree with that, but this is a different issue. Just in the event that a counselor sends an email to everyone on the council, which is the quorum of the council, and is there, and that email contains information that would be considered a council business, which would make it a violation of the open meeting law, have that conversation over email. That in those times when that has happened in the past, Councilor Freudman would do this routinely. He would write a memo to the council via email. It would end up in our packets as a memo on our agenda so the public could review it as we would in our emails. And so because it was an item of business, it needs to be in our packet as a communication at the very least, even though I think the request that people who control the FOI regulations in town would make is that each of us don't email each other about deliberations as a body. We can't, there's freedom of speech. You can't stop a counselor from sending an email. All I'm saying is in the event that one happens, that it be included as a petition request and communication so that the public can see it and the deliberation about it can happen in an open meeting if it's on our agenda.
The one exception to that rule would be communications between members of the same party caucus, which are clearly caucus communications and not council communications. Mr. Coleman.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Councilor Shaken. I made the mistake of hitting reply all.
All right. Mr. Osberger.
Just briefly, this is an aside, although email related. I did get another email request from you just recently, which I replied to, that, this is not your email address. And they said, oh, could you help me with buying an Apple Card? And it's got
my email address has been used in a fishing expedition. I did not send the emails, and IT department is aware of them.
Yeah. Rather anecdotally, I could read this to you. It's quite humorous.
I'd rather not know. Thank you. Okay. Anything for future agendas? Mr. Bruder.
I just wanted to, there was a constituent who reached out about May 6th as a Provider Appreciation Day and issuing a town,
Proclamation for the child care provider.
so just to, put that on to maybe be something that we discuss or take
Mr.
under advisement.
Aylesworth? Yes,
Yeah, I think the mayor and I communicated on this, and
yes.
we'll tee it up at the appropriate time.
Thank you.
All right. The next item is a motion to adjourn. Is there anybody who still has enough energy to make it? Mr. Bruder, Mr. Shuren, sorry. And the second by Mr. Osberger. All those in favor, raise your hands. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Yukon Women won. Double overtime.
Recording stopped.